The beer mug shattered against the wooden floor of Murphy's Roadhouse with a violent crack that silenced the bar instantly. In that moment of crystal-clear tension, time seemed to suspend itself as every head turned toward the source of the disturbance. "You think you're something special?" Viper Jackson's voice cut through the sudden quiet like a blade, his massive hand wrapped around the collar of the small woman who had been wiping down tables. The snake tattoo coiling around his thick neck seemed to writhe as he pulled her closer, his breath reeking of whiskey and menace. "I asked you a simple question, sweetheart. This bar pays protection, or this bar burns. Which one's it going to be?" Elena Rodriguez kept her brown eyes fixed on the floor, her body language screaming submission. At 5'4" in her worn sneakers, her white server's shirt hanging loose on her slight frame, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, everything about her whispered ordinary, forgettable, weak. The perfect prey for predators like the Desert Vipers Motorcycle Club, 10 of whom now formed a predatory circle around her. What they couldn't see was the slight shift in her weight distribution, the almost imperceptible tensing of muscles, the tactical assessment running behind those downcast eyes. They couldn't see the woman who had once commanded elite special operations in terrains so hostile that even mentioning the missions would violate multiple security protocols. They couldn't see Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez of 1st Force Recon, with her 47 confirmed kills and combat decorations locked away in a storage unit she visited only when the nightmares became unbearable. They saw only what she wanted them to see. A server, a nobody, harmless. Murphy's Roadhouse had stood on this stretch of highway outside Camp Pendleton for 3 decades, serving cold beer and simple food to Marines, veterans, and locals alike. The walls were adorned with fading photographs of military personnel through the years, American flags, unit insignias, the casual patriotism of a place that served those who served. For 6 months, Elena had made this place her sanctuary, her cover, her attempt at normality after years spent in shadows and blood. Her fingers brushed against the dog tag hanging from a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her loose shirt, her only concession to the identity she tried to leave behind. The worn metal was warm against her skin, a reminder of who she had been, who she was trying not to be anymore. The bar had been quieter than usual before the Desert Vipers arrived, just regulars nursing drinks and sharing stories in the amber glow of overhead lights. Sheriff Tom Bradley sat in his usual corner booth, off-duty, but still carrying the unmistakable bearing of 20 years in law enforcement, preceded by 2 tours in Iraq. A few construction workers occupied a table near the jukebox, and in another corner, a grizzled man in his 60s sipped coffee alone. Colonel Mike Harrison, retired Medal of Honor recipient, though Elena had never known his background, only that he tipped well and never caused trouble. The rumble of motorcycles had been the first warning, engines deliberately loud as they pulled into the gravel parking lot. Jake Lewis, the 25-year-old bartender, had tensed visibly when the door swung open, and Viper Jackson made his entrance like a conquering king, all 6'3" of him swaggering through the door with his arms spread wide. "Murphy's Roadhouse," he'd announced, looking around appreciatively. "Nice little operation you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it." Elena had continued folding napkins with military precision, each one a perfect triangle, as the bikers spread out in a tactical dispersal pattern that her trained eye recognized immediately. Not random, not chaotic. They were establishing dominance over the space, covering exits, creating an atmosphere of intimidation. She'd approached their table with notepad in hand, eyes downcast, voice deliberately soft as she asked for their order. The mockery had started immediately, comments about her ass, her breasts, what she might do for extra tips. She'd absorbed it all with practiced invisibility, the same way she'd once endured weeks of surveillance in hostile territory, by becoming so unremarkable that attention simply slid off her. But then Viper had demanded to see the owner, and the confrontation had escalated. When she informed him that Murphy was in Phoenix for the week, his demeanor had shifted from false friendliness to genuine menace. "I don't think you understand, sweetheart," he'd said, flicking a lighter open and closed with practiced intimidation. "This isn't a social call. Every bar from here to San Diego is under our protection. Those that refuse—" He'd let the sentence hang, the implication crystal clear. Now, as he gripped her collar and the bar fell silent, Elena felt the weight of multiple tactical decisions pressing down on her. She could neutralize Viper in 3 seconds, disable his closest companions in another 5. But that would mean exposing who she really was, abandoning the identity she'd carefully constructed over the past 3 years. You know what your problem is? Viper snarled, his face inches from hers. You think you're better than us. Think you're too good to show proper respect. His free hand grabbed the front of her shirt, bunching the fabric in his fist. Maybe I need to remind you of your place. Sheriff Bradley stood slowly, his weathered hand moving to rest near his hip, where his service weapon would have been if he'd been on duty. I'm going to have to ask you to take your hand off the lady, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. Viper laughed without turning around. You're off duty, out of your jurisdiction, and outnumbered 10-1, old man. Sit back down before you get hurt. Several other patrons, at least 5 wearing unit pins or military tattoos, shifted in their seats, ready to back Bradley's play. The air in Murphy's grew thick with the promise of violence. Tom, it's okay, Elena said softly, using the sheriff's first name. These gentlemen were just leaving. That's when Viper made his crucial mistake. He yanked her closer, his other hand reaching for her collar. You don't tell us when we leave. We leave when we're good and ready. And right now, I'm thinking we need to teach this whole bar a lesson about respect. Last chance, Viper growled. You're going to call Murphy right now and tell him he's got a new business partner, or things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone here. I can't do that, Elena said simply. That's when the shirt had torn. The sound of ripping fabric was shocking in its finality. The white cotton parting from collar to mid-chest as Viper yanked with all his considerable strength. Elena stumbled backward, the ruined shirt hanging open, revealing the black tank top underneath. But it was what that tank top revealed that changed everything. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the jukebox seemed to pause between songs, as if the universe itself needed a moment to process what had just been exposed. Across Elena Rodriguez's back, visible through the thin fabric of the tank top, was a work of art that told a story of service, sacrifice, and elite warrior status. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps spread majestically across her shoulder blades, the detailed work so precise you could make out individual feathers on the eagle's wings. But it was the text beneath that made several veterans in the bar gasp audibly. First Force Recon was inked in bold letters, marking her as a member of one of the most elite special operations units in the Marine Corps. Below that, her designation, Gunny E. Rodriguez, RO311, the military occupational specialty code for infantry, the tip of the spear, the ones who go where others fear to tread. But the tattoo was only part of the story. Surrounding it were scars, the kind of scars that told their own tales to those who knew how to read them. A puckered bullet wound near her left shoulder blade, the telltale marks of shrapnel along her ribs, a long, jagged scar that disappeared beneath the tank top's hem, suggesting a blade wound that had required serious medical attention. Viper Jackson stood frozen, his hand still clutching the torn fabric, his mouth slightly open as his brain tried to process what he was seeing. Behind him, his fellow desert vipers had gone equally still, the predatory confidence draining from their faces. Force Recon, Sheriff Bradley breathed, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. Holy hell. The transformation in Elena's bearing was subtle but unmistakable. She hadn't moved, hadn't taken a fighting stance, hadn't done anything overtly threatening. But something in the way she held herself had changed, like a switch being flipped from civilian to warrior. Her shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and when she finally spoke, her voice had lost its soft, submissive quality. Mr. Jackson, she said, using Viper's real name, which she shouldn't have known, I believe you owe me an apology for destroying my property. The shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable, like the pressure change before a thunderstorm. Viper Jackson's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally the dawning realization that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment. His grip on the torn fabric loosened, and the white cotton fluttered to the floor like a surrender flag. How do you know my name? His voice had lost its commanding bass, climbing higher with uncertainty. Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned slowly, giving everyone in the bar a clear view of the military artwork and battle scars that decorated her back. Several phones had appeared, people recording what they sensed was a moment they'd want to remember. But Elena didn't seem to notice or care. "Stephen Jackson," she said calmly, "dishonorably discharged from the Army 6 years ago for stealing and selling military equipment. Founded the Desert Vipers 3 years ago, currently wanted for questioning in 4 arson cases and 2 aggravated assaults." She paused, letting that sink in. "I make it my business to know who's threatening the establishments in my area of operation." "Your area of—" Viper started, then stopped, the full implications hitting him like a sledgehammer. From the corner booth, Colonel Harrison slowly stood up. Elena had served him coffee every Tuesday for 6 months, never knowing he was a Medal of Honor recipient. "Gunny Rodriguez," he said, his voice carrying the snap of command despite his civilian clothes. "First Force Recon. I remember you now. Operation Phantom Fury, Fallujah, 2004. Elena's stance shifted slightly, an unconscious response to a superior officer. "Sir, you're the one who held that schoolhouse for 17 hours with a broken rifle and 3 magazines of ammunition while the evac choppers tried to get through." It wasn't a question. "I had help, sir. Lance Corporal Williams and PFC Chen." Her voice caught slightly on the names. "They didn't make it out." Another patron stood up, Maria Santos, who ran the flower shop down the street. "Nobody knew she'd been a Navy corpsman attached to Marine units. I was at Camp Leatherneck when they brought you in. 60% burns, 3 bullet wounds, enough shrapnel in you to set off a metal detector at 50 yards. The doctor said you'd never walk again." "Doctors can be wrong," Elena said simply. The Desert Vipers were backing toward the door now, their earlier formation completely broken. But they found their path blocked by 5 men who had quietly repositioned themselves during the conversation. Each one had the bearing of someone who'd seen real combat, not the bar fights and intimidation tactics the bikers were used to. "Leaving so soon?" asked one of them, a Hispanic man with sergeant stripes tattooed on his forearm. "But you haven't apologized to the lady yet." Viper's face flushed red, caught between humiliation and his need to maintain face in front of his crew. "Look, we didn't know she was— if we'd known—" "Known what?" Elena stepped forward, and despite being nearly a foot shorter than Viper, he took an involuntary step back. "That I'd bled for this country? That I'd earned the right to be treated with basic human dignity? Or just that I could hurt you in ways you can't even imagine?" "All of the above," Viper admitted, his voice small. Sheriff Bradley had moved closer, his hand resting casually on his phone. "Ms. Rodriguez, would you like to press charges for assault? We have plenty of witnesses to the unwanted touching and destruction of property." Elena considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No need, Sheriff. I think Mr. Jackson and his friends were just leaving, and they won't be back. Will you, Mr. Jackson?" The threat in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Viper nodded rapidly, his shaved head bobbing like a dashboard ornament. "No, ma'am, we won't be back. In fact, we'll make sure everyone knows Murphy's is off limits, completely off limits. And the other establishments you've been threatening." Elena's tone suggested this wasn't a request. We'll reconsider our business model," Viper stammered. "Kneel." The command cracked like a whip, and Viper found himself dropping to his knees before his conscious mind could process what was happening. It was the voice of someone used to absolute obedience in life-or-death situations. "Ma'am?" He looked up at her, confused and terrified in equal measure. "You assaulted me, destroyed my property, threatened my workplace and my colleagues." Elena's voice was calm, almost conversational. "In some parts of the world I've operated in, you'd already be dead. But we do things differently here. So you're going to apologize properly, and then you're going to leave. And you're going to spread the word that this entire county is under the protection of Marines who've seen scarier things than you on our easiest days." Viper's apology was stuttering but sincere, delivered on his knees in front of his entire crew and a bar full of witnesses. When Elena finally nodded her acceptance, he scrambled to his feet and headed for the door, his fellow Desert Vipers following like whipped dogs. At the threshold, he turned back. "Can I ask, why hide it? Why pretend to be just a server?" Elena's expression softened slightly. Because, Mr. Jackson, real warriors don't need to advertise. We don't wear our strength on the outside. We carry it quietly and use it only when necessary. I came here for peace, to serve coffee and wipe tables and remember what it feels like to be normal. You took that from me tonight. The bikers left without another word, their motorcycles starting up with notably less swagger than they had arrived with. Through the window, patrons watched them disappear into the night, and everyone somehow knew they wouldn't be back. The bar remained quiet for a long moment after they left. Then Colonel Harrison spoke up. Gunny, if you don't mind my asking, what are you doing here? With your record, you could be doing anything. Private security, law enforcement, teaching at Quantico. Elena picked up her torn shirt from the floor, folding it with the same precision she'd shown with the napkins. With respect, sir, I've done my time being extraordinary. I've been the tip of the spear, the first one through the door, the last one out. I've got 47 confirmed kills and probably twice that unconfirmed. I've got a box full of medals in a storage unit and nightmares that wake me up at 300 every night. She moved behind the bar, pulling out a spare Murphy's Roadhouse shirt from the employee cubby. I came here because nobody knew who I was, because I could pour coffee for construction workers and not have them thank me for my service with that look in their eyes. You know the one, sir. The one that's equal parts awe and pity and fear. But they ran you out, Maria Santos said softly. Those pendejos took your piece. No, Elena said, slipping on the fresh shirt and buttoning it with steady hands. They reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. That peace isn't something you find by hiding. It's something you create by standing your ground. Jake, who had remained frozen behind the bar throughout the entire confrontation, finally found his voice. Elena, I had no idea. 6 months we've worked together and I never... That was the point, Jake. She smiled at him, and it was the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her. I didn't want to be Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, Force Recon Marine. I wanted to be Elena, the woman who makes sure your coffee is always fresh and your tables are clean. But you're a hero, someone called out from the back of the bar. Elena's expression hardened slightly. No, Williams and Chen were heroes. They died protecting civilians. I'm just someone who was too stubborn to die and too damaged to do anything else but survive. Colonel Harrison approached the bar, his movements careful and respectful. Gunny, I know we don't know each other well, but I want you to know what you did in Fallujah, holding that position, protecting those kids. Williams and Chen didn't die for nothing. 37 children made it out because of what you three did. Elena's hands stilled on the bar towels she'd been folding. 38, sir. One more was born in the evac chopper. Mother named her Elena. The room fell silent again, the weight of that revelation settling over everyone like a benediction. Here was a woman who had literally given her body as a shield for innocence, who had paid in blood and burns and bullets for the safety of children she'd never met, and she'd been content to disappear into anonymity, serving beer and wiping tables. So what now? Jake asked. I mean, everyone's going to know. Word's going to spread. You can't go back to being invisible. Lena considered this as she resumed her normal duties, collecting empty glasses and wiping down tables as if nothing had happened. Then I guess I'll have to be visible, but on my terms. Over the next hour, the bar slowly returned to something approaching normal. Conversations resumed, drinks were ordered, and the jukebox played its usual selection of classic rock and country. But there was a different energy in the air. People sat a little straighter. Veterans who'd been nursing their PTSD in silence found themselves talking to each other, sharing stories they'd kept locked away. The revelation of Elena's identity had somehow given everyone permission to be more themselves. Sheriff Bradley approached her as she delivered a fresh round to a table of construction workers. Elena, I want to apologize. I should have intervened sooner. I saw the signs, the way you move, the way you observe everything. But I didn't put it together. Nothing to apologize for, Sheriff. You did exactly what you should have done. Tried to de-escalate. She paused, then added, Army, right? Iraq. He nodded. 2 tours, infantry. Nothing special. Just a grunt doing his job. Every soldier is special, Sheriff. Everyone who stands up when others won't, who goes where others fear to go. Don't diminish your service. As the night wore on, Elena found herself fielding questions from curious patrons, but she answered them with the same quiet efficiency she showed in her serving. Yes, she'd been in Force Recon. No, she couldn't talk about most of her missions. Yes, the scars hurt when it rained. No, she didn't regret her service, just some of the things service had required. Around 11 p.m., as the bar was winding down, a young woman approached her hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 22, with the lean build of a runner and the 1,000-yard stare Elena recognized all too well. "Ma'am, I'm Lance Corporal Sarah Webb, just back from Afghanistan. I heard what happened, what you said about not being able to go back to normal." Her voice dropped. "How do you do it? How do you come back from that and just function?" Elena set down her tray and gave the young Marine her full attention. "You don't come back, Lance Corporal. Not really. The person who left doesn't exist anymore. You build a new person with the pieces that survived, and you find a new mission." "What's yours?" Elena gestured around the bar. "This, serving people, creating a place where veterans can come and not have to explain themselves, where civilians can learn that we're not broken, just different, where someone like you can ask someone like me how to survive and get an honest answer, which is one day at a time, one table at a time, one act of service at a time. The skills that made us good Marines, attention to detail, dedication to mission, protecting others, they don't go away. We just have to find new ways to use them." As closing time approached, Elena found herself alone with Jake as they cleaned up. The young bartender kept shooting her glances, clearly bursting with questions. "Go ahead," she finally said. "Do you regret it? Having your cover blown?" Elena considered this as she turned chairs upside down on tables for mopping. "You know what? No, I've been hiding for 3 years, trying to pretend that part of me didn't exist, but it does. It's as much a part of me as my eyes or my hands. Maybe it's time to stop running from it." "Will you stay at Murphy's? I mean, where else would I go? This is my post now, and Marines don't abandon their posts." Jake nodded, seeming satisfied with her answer. But as he turned to walk away, Elena noticed something she hadn't before. A small tattoo on the back of his neck, partially hidden by his collar. The silhouette of a Marine Corps emblem, with a date beneath it. She recognized it immediately, a memorial tattoo. Someone close to Jake had been a Marine, and they were gone now. Before she could ask about it, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Not her regular phone, but the specialized military device she kept for emergencies. The screen showed a message from a number she hadn't seen in years. "Echo team compromised. Need extraction. Coordinates to follow." Elena stared at the message, her hand tightening around the phone. Echo team, a name she'd tried to forget, a past she'd tried to outrun. And now it had found her, right when she'd finally stopped hiding. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, noticing her frozen posture. "Fine," she said automatically, slipping the phone back into her pocket. "Just tired. It's been a long night." But her mind was racing. Echo Team had been her last assignment before Murphy's, before her attempt at disappearing into civilian life. A classified special operations unit that officially didn't exist, comprised of elite operators tasked with the most sensitive missions, the kind that governments denied knowledge of even decades later. Echo Team, 7 operators including Elena, deployed to the Afghanistan-Pakistan border in 2010 for what should have been a routine intelligence gathering mission. Instead, they'd stumbled onto something that powerful people had been willing to kill to keep secret. The resulting ambush had left the entire team officially listed as killed in action, though Elena had survived against all odds. For 3 years, she'd believed she was the only one. 3 years of nightmares, of survivor's guilt, of wondering if she could have done something differently, saved someone else besides herself. And now this message, suggesting she wasn't alone after all. "Jake," she said, making a quick decision, "I need to speak with Colonel Harrison before he leaves. Can you finish up here?" "Sure thing," Jake replied, though his expression showed concern. "Everything all right?" "Just some unfinished business from before," Elena said vaguely. "Nothing to worry about." She found Harrison in the parking lot, about to get into his car. The retired colonel turned at her approach, his weathered face showing understanding before she even spoke. "The incident with the Desert Vipers isn't what's troubling you," he observed. "Something else has come up." Elena hesitated, then decided on directness. Sir, I need to speak with you privately. It's about my last deployment. Harrison's eyes sharpened with interest. My house is 15 minutes from here. Would that suffice? 20 minutes later, they sat in Harrison's study, a room that reflected the man's military career through carefully arranged memorabilia and books. Elena had shown him the message, explained the basics of Echo Team's mission and disastrous end, careful to omit classified details even now. So you believe one of your teammates survived, just as you did? Harrison summarized, and is now reaching out for help. Yes, sir, but it could also be a trap. Elena's expression was troubled. The only people who knew about Echo Team were other team members and our handler at Central Command. If someone is using this channel to contact me, then either a teammate survived or someone has accessed highly classified information, Harrison finished. Neither option is particularly comforting. No, sir. Elena's fingers traced the edge of her phone. If someone from Echo Team is alive and in trouble, I need to help them, but I can't go in blind. Harrison considered this, his tactical mind clearly evaluating options. You'll need support, intelligence, surveillance, possibly extraction resources. I was hoping you might have some contacts who could help, sir. Discreetly. Harrison smiled slightly. Retirement doesn't mean abandoning the brotherhood, Ghani. I maintain certain connections that might prove useful. He reached for his own phone. Let me make a few calls. In the meantime, tell me everything you can about Echo Team's final mission. The more I know, the better I can assess the situation. Elena took a deep breath, then began recounting the details she could share. We were tasked with gathering intelligence on suspected arms dealing across the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Standard operation, low risk according to our briefing, but what we found wasn't standard at all. She described how Echo Team had discovered evidence that a private military contractor called Aegis Defense was supplying weapons to insurgent groups, American-made weapons that were being used to kill coalition forces. But worse, they'd uncovered financial records showing Aegis wasn't just supplying one side of the conflict, they were arming both sides, prolonging the war for profit. We documented everything, encrypted the data, and called for extraction. Elena continued, her voice growing tighter as she approached the painful memories. That's when everything went to hell. Our extraction point was compromised. We were ambushed, hit from multiple directions. Professional operators, not local insurgents. They knew exactly where we'd be and when. Someone sold you out, Harrison stated grimly. Someone with access to our mission parameters, our extraction protocols, Elena confirmed. We were scattered trying to establish defensive positions. Chen went down first, sniper round, center mass. Wright tried to reach him and took 2 in the chest. I lost track of the others in the chaos. Last I saw of Captain Winters, our CO, he was moving toward higher ground, trying to call for emergency extraction. But you made it out. Barely, Elena admitted. I took multiple rounds, major burns from an RPG that landed too close. Lost consciousness. When I came to, I was being dragged by Lieutenant Mackenzie, our intelligence officer. She'd been hit in the leg, femoral artery severed. I tried to stop the bleeding, but Elena swallowed hard. She died in my arms. I should have died on that mountain too. How did you survive? A shepherd found me, half dead, 2 days later. An old man who'd seen too many wars to care which side I was on. He patched me up as best he could, then transported me to a Médecins Sans Frontières outpost. From there, I was evacuated to Germany under a false identity. By the time I regained full consciousness, Echo Team had been officially declared killed in action, and all records of our final mission had been classified at the highest level. Harrison absorbed this, his expression grave. And you've been hiding ever since. I underwent reconstructive surgery, physical therapy. When I was strong enough, I disappeared. New identity, new life. Elena's voice hardened. I knew that whoever had betrayed us would want to make sure there were no survivors. No one who could tell the truth about what we'd found. And now, of us? Harrison gestured to the phone with his cryptic message. Now I need to know if one of my people is still alive, still fighting. Elena's resolve was clear in her voice. And I need to know who betrayed us. Harrison nodded, understanding the dual imperative of rescue and justice. We'll start with the coordinates when they come through. I'll have them analyzed, Get satellite imagery if possible. In the meantime, his sentence was cut short by the arrival of a second message on Elena's secure phone, a set of GPS coordinates followed by 0200 tomorrow. Come alone. Harrison input the coordinates into his computer, bringing up a map of a remote area in the mountains north of San Diego. Isolated location, minimal road access, limited cellular coverage. Tactically speaking, it's an ideal meeting point or an ideal ambush site. Either way I'm going, Elena stated firmly. Not alone, Harrison countered. Whatever this message says, walking into an unknown situation without backup is suicide, and you know it. Elena recognized the steel in his voice, the tone of a commander who would not be disobeyed on matters of operational security. What do you suggest, sir? We establish a perimeter, set up overwatch positions, create contingency plans. I have some people I can call, former operators who understand discretion and don't ask unnecessary questions. And Murphy's? Elena asked, suddenly remembering her job, her cover, the life she'd been building. You'll need a story to explain your absence, Harrison acknowledged. Something plausible but vague. Elena thought of Jake, of his obvious concern when she'd left abruptly, of the memorial tattoo on his neck that spoke of personal loss connected to the Marine Corps. Could she trust him with a partial truth? Not the classified details, but enough to explain her temporary departure? I need to speak with Jake, she decided. He deserves some explanation if I'm going to disappear for a few days. Harrison nodded. I'll make my calls, start putting together what we need. Meet me back here in 2 hours. And Elena, he added as she stood to leave, be careful. If someone from Echo Team really is reaching out, they're taking an enormous risk. And if it's a trap, then someone knows I'm alive and wants to finish what they started 3 years ago. Elena finished grimly. Either way, we need to be ready. She left Harrison's house with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The message from Echo Team had awakened something she'd tried to suppress. The tactical mindset, the hyper-awareness of threats and opportunities, the cold calculation of risk versus reward. The warrior she'd been trying not to be was emerging once more, like a creature rousing from hibernation, stretching muscles long dormant but not atrophied. As she drove back to Murphy's, Elena's mind was already running through preparations. She'd need weapons, tactical gear, communications equipment, all things she'd hidden away when she'd adopted her civilian identity. The storage unit she rarely visited contained more than just metals and memories. It held the tools of her former trade, carefully preserved for a contingency she'd hoped would never arise. Murphy's was closed when she arrived, but lights still shone from the back office. Elena found Jake there doing the final accounting for the night. I thought you'd gone home, he said, looking up with surprise. I need to talk to you, Elena replied, taking a seat across from him. I'm going to be away for a few days. Personal business. Jake studied her face, seeing something there that made him close the accounting book. This is about that message you got earlier, the one that made you freeze up like you'd seen a ghost. Elena hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. Someone from my past needs help. Someone I thought was dead. I have to go. Is it dangerous? Jake asked directly. Could be, Elena admitted. That's why I'm telling you. If I'm not back in 3 days, there's a letter in my apartment on the bookshelf behind The Art of War. It explains some things, has some contacts who should be notified. Jake's expression grew serious. This sounds like the kind of instructions someone gives when they're not sure they're coming back, Elena. Just a precaution, she assured him. But after tonight, after what happened with the Desert Vipers, I think you deserve to know that there's more to my story than what was revealed. Jake was quiet for a moment, then turned his chair slightly, exposing the memorial tattoo on his neck that Elena had noticed earlier. Staff Sergeant Michael Lewis, he said quietly. My father served with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, 3 tours in Afghanistan, came home with all his limbs but missing pieces of himself no one could see. Started working for a private security contractor called Aegis Defense. 6 months later, he put his service weapon in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Elena felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. Aegis Defense, the same private military contractor Echo Team had been investigating. The same organization whose illegal arms dealing had led to the ambush that had supposedly killed her entire team. Jake, she said carefully, Did your father ever talk about his work with Aegis? Not directly, but in the weeks before he died, he changed. Became paranoid, started checking the locks 3, 4 times a night, kept saying he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd been part of something wrong. Jake's voice tightened with suppressed emotion. When I asked what he meant, he'd just shake his head and say it was better if I didn't know. Did he keep any records, journals, files related to his work? He had a journal he wrote in every night. Mom found it after he died, but when she went to get it from his desk drawer, it was gone, like someone had been in our house. Jake looked up at Elena, a dawning suspicion in his eyes. Why are you asking about Aegis? Elena made a swift decision. Jake deserved more than vague reassurances, especially if his father's death was connected to the same conspiracy that had nearly killed her. Because the mission that almost killed me, the one I've been hiding from for 3 years, involved investigating Aegis Defense for illegal arms dealing in Afghanistan. We found evidence they were selling weapons to both sides of the conflict, prolonging the war for profit. Before we could report what we'd found, we were ambushed. My entire team was declared killed in action, though it seems at least one other person may have survived. Jake's face had gone pale. You think my father discovered the same thing? That his suicide wasn't really a suicide? I don't know, Elena admitted, but it's a possibility we should consider. Then I'm coming with you, Jake stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. If there's even a chance this is connected to my father's death, I have a right to be there. Jake, this could be extremely dangerous. These people don't hesitate to eliminate threats. I don't care, he insisted. My father deserves justice, and you need someone watching your back. Elena was about to refuse when her secure phone vibrated again. A new message, this one more urgent. Extraction window closing, Aegis hunting survivors. Nightingale compromised. Nightingale, the code name for Lieutenant Sarah Mackenzie, Echo Team's intelligence officer. The woman Elena had believed died in her arms on that mountain. What is it? Jake asked, noting her expression. Confirmation that this is bigger than I thought, Elena said grimly, and that we're running out of time. She made her decision. You can come, but only as far as the support team's position. You stay with Colonel Harrison, follow his orders exactly, and remain in the secure location. This isn't negotiable, Jake. He nodded, accepting the compromise. When do we leave? Now, Elena replied, already heading for the door. We have preparations to make, and time is running out. As they left Murphy's Roadhouse, Elena felt the weight of command settling back onto her shoulders. The responsibility not just for a mission, but for the lives of those who would assist her. Jake, Harrison, and whoever else the colonel recruited, they were now her team, her people to protect while completing the objective. The calm server who had wiped tables and poured coffee for 6 months was gone, replaced by Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, Force Recon Marine, sole survivor of Echo Team. The warrior had returned, and she had a mission to complete: rescue a fallen comrade, expose a dangerous conspiracy, and finally confront the betrayal that had haunted her for 3 years. The hunt was on, and this time, Elena wasn't running away. She was running toward the fire, toward the truth, toward the reckoning long overdue. Colonel Harrison's house had transformed in the 2 hours since Elena had left. The study now resembled a tactical operations center, with maps, satellite imagery, and communications equipment arranged with military precision. 3 people Elena didn't recognize were already at work, their focused efficiency marking them as former operators even without introduction. Gunny Rodriguez, Harrison greeted her formally, a subtle shift acknowledging her return to operational status. Our team is assembling. Let me make introductions. The first was a lean, silver-haired man with the watchful eyes of someone who had spent decades in intelligence work. Frank Murphy, Harrison said simply. Murphy? Elena repeated, making the connection immediately. As in Murphy's Roadhouse? The man nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. Owner on paper, former DIA in practice, Defense Intelligence Agency, he clarified for Jake's benefit. The bar proposed days explain covered for gathering information and monitoring activities around Camp Pendleton. You knew who I was, Elena realized. All this time. I suspected, Murphy corrected. Your background made you an ideal employee. Someone who could handle herself if trouble arose, but who wouldn't draw attention. Your skills at blending in were impressive, even to someone with my training. Elena absorbed this revelation, reassessing the past 6 months in light of this new information. Murphy had never been the absent owner she'd assumed, but a calculated presence, or absence, watching her as she watched others. Harrison continued the introductions. A stocky woman with close-cropped gray hair and steady hands was Maria Santos, the same woman from the flower shop who had revealed herself as a former Navy corpsman during the confrontation with the Desert Vipers. Corpsman Santos served with Force Recon units for 15 years, Harrison explained. There's no one better to have as medical support if things go sideways. The third team member was Sheriff Tom Bradley, now dressed in tactical gear rather than his usual uniform. Tom was more than just infantry in Iraq, Harrison noted. Army Rangers, 2 tours, before joining law enforcement. His jurisdiction gives us legal cover for certain aspects of the operation. And I've brought someone else, Elena said, gesturing to Jake. Jake Lewis. His father was Staff Sergeant Michael Lewis, 2-5 Marines. After 3 tours in Afghanistan, he worked for Aegis Defense briefly before his death under suspicious circumstances. Harrison's expression sharpened with interest. Suspicious how? Officially ruled a suicide, Jake supplied, but preceded by paranoia, statements about being part of something wrong, and a missing journal that disappeared after his death. Murphy and Harrison exchanged significant looks. That fits the pattern we've been tracking, Murphy said. 17 veterans who worked for Aegis have died in the past 3 years. Suicides, accidents, overdoses, all with similar circumstances, all after showing signs of distress or paranoia. You've been investigating Aegis, Elena realized, the pieces falling into place. That's why you're here, why you're helping me. For over a year, Harrison confirmed. Murphy identified the pattern, brought it to my attention. We've been gathering evidence, building a case, but it's been slow work. Aegis has powerful protections, government contracts, political connections, layers of deniability. Until now, Murphy added, we've lacked the crucial element, someone from inside who could testify to what they're really doing. Someone with first-hand knowledge of their illegal operations. Someone like a survivor from Echo Team, Elena concluded. Someone like Lieutenant Mackenzie. If she's really alive, Tom cautioned, this could still be a trap. Which is why we're going to approach this with full tactical discipline, Harrison stated. Murphy has acquired the equipment we need. Maria has prepared medical kits for all contingencies. Tom has secured our legal position as much as possible. Now we need your expertise, Gunny. This is your mission, your contact. How do you want to proceed? Elena felt a rush of gratitude for these professionals who had rallied around her so quickly, bringing their diverse skills to bear on a dangerous operation with minimal questions asked. This was the brotherhood and sisterhood of service that transcended branches, ranks, and years, the unspoken bond of those who had stood in harm's way for others. We'll need a 3-phase approach, she began, falling naturally into the role of mission commander. First, reconnaissance of the meeting site. Second, establishment of a secure perimeter with multiple observation points. Third, controlled contact with fail-safe protocols in place. She moved to the satellite imagery, studying the terrain around the coordinates. The meeting point is here, in a small valley surrounded by higher ground. Excellent for observation, but also a potential kill box if things go wrong. We'll need at least 3 overwatch positions, staggered approach vectors, and a rapid extraction plan. As Elena outlined her tactical assessment, she noted that Jake was watching her with a new awareness, seeing for the first time the commander she had been, the leader who had guided elite operators through high-risk missions in hostile territory. This wasn't the quiet server from Murphy's Roadhouse, but a warrior in her element, calm and precise under pressure. What about additional security? Tom asked. If Aegis is actively hunting survivors, they might have surveillance on the area already. Agreed, Elena said. We'll need counter-surveillance measures, communication security protocols, and a cover story in case we're intercepted by local authorities. I can handle that, Murphy offered. My DIA credentials are still active for certain purposes. If questioned, we're conducting a training exercise for search and rescue operations. As they continued planning, Elena's secure phone vibrated with another message. Bring the evidence. Trust no one outside. Echo. Evidence? Harrison questioned, reading over her shoulder. Elena frowned. The data we collected on Aegis's operations before the ambush. It was lost when the team was hit. She looked up, a sudden suspicion forming. Unless someone recovered it, Murphy finished. Someone who survived, just like you did. But I don't have it, Elena pointed out. I was evacuated with nothing but the clothes on my back, and those were mostly burned away. Could be a verification method, Tom suggested. A way for your contact to confirm you're really you. If you show up without understanding the reference to evidence, they might assume you're an imposter or under coercion. Or it could be a test, Maria added, to see if you remember details only a true Echo team member would know. Elena considered these possibilities. I need to respond, acknowledge the message without promising something I can't deliver. She typed carefully. Understood. Echo Protocol Zulu. Confirm identity. The response came almost immediately. Zulu confirmed. Midnight Shadow. Elena's breath caught. Midnight Shadow had been the classified designation of Echo Team's final mission. Information that only someone with high-level clearance or direct connection to the mission would know. It's real, she said quietly. Someone from Echo Team really is alive. The team continued preparations with renewed urgency, gathering equipment, establishing communications protocols, planning for various contingencies. As the others worked, Elena pulled Jake aside. You understand that you're staying with the support team, right? You don't enter the contact zone under any circumstances. Jake nodded reluctantly. I get it. I'm not trained for this, but I need to be there, Elena. I need to know if this connects to my father. I'll find out, she promised. If Aegis is responsible for your father's death, if he discovered what they were doing and was silenced for it, we'll expose them. We'll get justice. As twilight approached, the team made final preparations to move out. Elena retrieved her own tactical gear from the storage unit she rarely visited, the tools and equipment of her former life, carefully preserved for a contingency she'd hoped would never arise. The weight of the body armor felt familiar against her torso, the tactical belt with its various attachments settling naturally at her waist. In the privacy of the unit, she allowed herself a moment to acknowledge the transformation. From Elena the server to Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, Force Recon Marine. Among her stored possessions was a small wooden box containing her medals and decorations, Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, combat action ribbons, the tangible symbols of service and sacrifice she had locked away along with her identity. She opened it briefly, touching the Purple Heart with reverent fingers, remembering the cost it represented. At the bottom of the box lay a photograph, the only one she had kept of Echo Team. 7 operators in combat gear, faces grimy but smiling, standing in front of a nondescript military building. The timestamp read April 12, 2010, just weeks before the fatal mission. Elena studied each face in turn. Captain James Winters, their CO, tall and serious. Lieutenant Sarah Mackenzie, intelligence officer, sharp-eyed and focused. Sergeant First Class David Chen, communications specialist, always with a hint of mischief in his expression. Corporal Michael Rodriguez, no relation, demolitions expert, solid and dependable. Petty Officer First Class Thomas Wright, medical support, the quiet professional. Staff Sergeant William Blackburn, sniper, intense and precise. And herself, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, team leader in the field despite Winters' official command position. The weight of responsibility for these lives had been hers, and she had carried the burden of their loss for 3 years. Now, with the possibility that at least one had survived, that burden shifted from grief to purpose. If Mackenzie was alive, if she was in danger, Elena would find her, would bring her home, would finish what Echo Team had started. We're ready to move, Harrison's voice came from outside the storage unit. It's time, Gunny. Elena carefully replaced the photograph, closed the box, and secured it once more. Then she stepped out to join her new team, her expression set with determination. Let's bring them home, she said simply. As they drove toward the mountains north of San Diego, Elena felt a strange sense of rightness descend upon her. For 3 years she had been running from her past, hiding from who she truly was. now heading toward unknown danger with a mission to complete and people depending on her. She was more herself than she had been since that fateful day in the Hindu Kush. The warrior had returned, and with her, the hope of justice long delayed. The mountain air cut sharp and clean as Elena led her team through the dense forest. Moonlight filtered through pine branches, casting ghostly patterns on the forest floor. Each member moved with practiced silence. Harrison and Murphy establishing the perimeter, Tom and Viper handling security sweeps, Maria and Jake maintaining the medical staging position half a mile back. Elena felt the familiar rhythm of an operation settling into her muscles and mind, the heightened awareness of every sound, the automatic scanning for threats, the mental mapping of terrain and positions. 3 years of civilian life fell away like shed skin, revealing the warrior beneath. As they approached the coordinates, Elena signaled for the team to hold position while she and Murphy conducted final reconnaissance. The meeting point was a small clearing surrounded by the protective embrace of old-growth trees, offering both concealment and multiple escape routes, a location chosen by someone with tactical training. "No sign of surveillance equipment," Murphy murmured, his experienced eyes scanning the perimeter. "No disturbed ground suggesting recent activity." Elena nodded, completing her own assessment. "Approach vectors clear, no obvious choke points or ambush positions." She checked her watch. 30 minutes to rendezvous. Harrison, establish overwatch positions. Tom, coordinate with Viper for secondary security. I'll make the approach alone. Negative, Harrison countered immediately. Too exposed. The message specified alone, Elena reminded him. If this is truly Mackenzie or another Echo Team survivor, they'll be hyper-vigilant, ready to disappear at the first sign of unexpected personnel. "And if it's a trap?" Murphy asked, the former intelligence officer focused on worst-case scenarios. "Then having the team scattered in defensive positions is our best insurance policy," Elena replied, "but I've got the distress signal button. Any sign of threat, I activate it, and you respond accordingly." After a brief tactical discussion, they reached consensus. Elena would approach alone, but with the team positioned strategically to observe and intervene if necessary. As the others moved to their assigned positions, Harrison held Elena back for a moment. "Gunny," he said quietly, "I understand the pull of loyalty to your former team. But remember, you have a new team now, too. Don't sacrifice yourself needlessly for ghosts." Elena nodded, touched by his concern. "No unnecessary risks, Colonel, I promise." At precisely midnight, Elena entered the clearing, keeping to the shadows at its edge. The designated meeting point was a fallen log at the center, exposed but offering clear sightlines in all directions, a compromise between vulnerability and tactical awareness. She waited, scanning continuously, her senses alert for any disruption in the night's natural rhythm. 5 minutes passed. 10. The forest remained still save for the occasional whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant call of a night bird. Then, a subtle shift in the air, the faintest sound of controlled breathing from the opposite tree line. Elena remained motionless, giving no indication she'd detected the presence. Whoever was watching her was good, very good, moving with the precision that came only from elite training. "The storm comes at midnight," a voice finally called from the darkness. The first half of an Echo Team recognition code. "But the eagle flies at dawn," Elena responded, completing the authentication. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, lean, moving with the careful precision of a trained operator. As they approached, Elena strained to see their face in the dim light. Then the clouds parted, moonlight illuminating features both familiar and changed. "It's been a long time, Gunny." Captain James Winters, her former commanding officer, stood before her, a man she'd believed dead for 3 years. His once military bearing was somewhat diminished, his face gaunt, a jagged scar running from his right temple to his jaw. But the eyes were unmistakable, the same piercing intelligence, the same guarded caution. "Winters," Elena breathed, shock washing over her. "You're alive." "Barely," he replied, stepping closer, "and we don't have much time." Elena's mind raced, processing this unexpected development. Her messages had mentioned Nightingale, Mackenzie's code name. She'd assumed it was Mackenzie reaching out, not Winters. "Your message mentioned Nightingale," she said, maintaining professional focus despite her shock. Is Mackenzie alive too? Pain flashed across Winter's face. I don't know. We were separated during the ambush. I've been trying to find her using old channels, but he shook his head. The message was bait, Elena. I needed to be sure it was really you. How did you find me? I never lost track of you, Winters admitted. After I recovered from my injuries, I started tracking Echo Team's aftermath. The official reports, the cover story, the convenient training accident that explained away our deaths. When I discovered you were alive, working at a roadside bar of all places, I kept my distance. It wasn't safe to contact you. Not then. What changed? Winters glanced around, a habitual security check. Aegis is moving forward with something big. Something that makes arming insurgents look like a minor infraction. His voice dropped. Chemical weapons, Elena, designed for domestic deployment. They're calling it Project Safeguard, crowd control technology for civil unrest scenarios. But it's lethal, and they're preparing for mass production. The implications sent a chill down Elena's spine. How do you know this? Because I've spent 3 years gathering evidence against them. Winters produced a small flash drive from his jacket. Everything we collected in the Hindu Kush, plus what I've accumulated since then. Financial records, test results, deployment plans, communications showing knowledge at the highest levels of government. Elena studied him, years of operational instinct warring with the relief of finding a teammate alive. Why should I trust you? You disappeared during the ambush. For 3 years, I thought you were dead. Winter's expression hardened. Because I couldn't trust anyone, not at first. Someone betrayed Echo Team that day, Elena. Someone with inside knowledge of our mission, our extraction protocols. I had to be certain it wasn't you. The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. You thought I sold out our team? My friends? I didn't know what to think, Winters admitted. I was injured, disoriented. By the time I could think clearly, the official report had already declared us all KI, and then I discovered something that made me question everything. He pulled a file from his jacket and handed it to her. This is the after-action report on our mission. Classified, top-level clearance. Notice who signed off on it. Elena opened the file, scanning quickly to the bottom. The signature made her blood run cold. Colonel Richard Keller, the same CIA liaison who had briefed them before the mission. Keller was the one who sent us in, she said slowly. He knew exactly what we were looking for, where we would be. And he made sure we never came back, Winters finished grimly. Because what we found wasn't just about Aegis arming both sides of the conflict. It was about who was backing Aegis, high-level government officials, intelligence directors, military contractors. A network of powerful people profiting from perpetual war. Before Elena could respond, her comm unit crackled with Harrison's urgent voice. Movement on the ridge, multiple heat signatures approaching from the north. Armed personnel. Simultaneously, Tom's voice cut in. Vehicle approaching on the access road. Tactical formation. Looks like private security. We've been compromised, Winter said grimly, seemingly unsurprised. They must have been tracking me. We need to move. Now. My team, Elena started, but Winters cut her off. They're coming for us, Elena, for Echo Team. Your friends will be collateral damage if they get caught in the crossfire. The sound of distant rotors reached them, a helicopter approaching from the east. All units, fall back to extraction point Alpha, Elena commanded into her comm. Possible hostile contact. Move now. What about you? Harrison's concerned voice replied. Execute the plan. I'll meet you at the secondary rendezvous. Elena turned to Winters. Lead the way. But know this, if this is a trap, I'll kill you myself. A ghost of a smile crossed Winters' face. Some things never change, Gunny. They moved swiftly through the forest, away from the approaching forces, deeper into the mountains. Behind them, the sound of the helicopter grew louder, and flashlight beams began to cut through the trees as ground teams entered the clearing. This way, Winters urged, guiding her toward a steep, rocky slope. There's a network of old mining tunnels that run through this whole area. Aegis uses them for storage and secure movement, but I've mapped sections they don't know about. As they climbed, Elena's mind raced with questions. If Winters had survived, Could others from Echo Team have made it out as well? Why had he waited so long to contact her? And most importantly, could she trust him now? They reached a narrow fissure in the rock face, barely visible in the darkness. Winters slipped inside and Elena followed, finding herself in a tight passageway that quickly opened into a larger tunnel reinforced with old timber supports. The air was cool and damp, smelling of earth and decay. Half a mile in, there's a junction. We go left, it leads to a small chamber I've been using as a safe house. Winters produced a small tactical flashlight, illuminating their path. It's not comfortable, but it's secure. The tunnel eventually widened into a rough-hewn chamber about 15 feet square. A camp bed sat in one corner, alongside a small table covered with maps, documents, and a laptop. A generator hummed quietly in another corner, powering a few dim lights and communications equipment. "Home sweet home," Winters said dryly, securing the entrance behind them, at least for the past month. Elena took in the sparse accommodations, the military precision of the layout, the organized chaos of an intelligence operation. Wall space was covered with photographs, documents, and maps connected by red string, creating a complex web of information. "You've been busy," she observed, moving closer to examine the wall. Photos of various Aegis facilities, personnel files, shipping manifests, financial records, all meticulously arranged and annotated. 3 years of work, Winters confirmed, moving to the table. Tracking Aegis operations across the globe, following money trails, identifying key personnel. It hasn't been easy, especially alone. Elena studied the wall, her tactical mind processing the information displayed there. The scope of Aegis's operations was staggering. Not just arms dealing and military contracting, but political manipulation, blackmail, and targeted eliminations of potential whistleblowers. "This isn't just a company," she said, tracing connections between photographs. "It's a shadow infrastructure. Military, intelligence, politics, finance. They have people in key positions across the board," Winters agreed. "Aegis isn't just a rogue contractor. It's the private enforcement arm for a shadow network within the government itself. And Project Safeguard is their next evolution," Elena concluded, focusing on a section of the wall dedicated to the chemical weapons program. "Why develop chemical weapons for domestic use?" "Control," Winters explained grimly. "Imagine having the capability to neutralize any opposition, from individual whistleblowers to mass protests, without leaving evidence of foul play. Natural-looking deaths that can be attributed to existing health conditions or environmental factors." "How close are they to deployment?" "Final testing phase. They've been conducting limited field trials in controlled environments. The results have been—" Winters paused, his voice tightening. "Let's just say they're effective. And now they're preparing for mass production at a facility right here in these mountains." Elena activated her comm unit, needing to check on her team's status. "Harrison, report." Static hissed for several seconds before Harrison's voice came through, distorted but understandable. "Secondary rendezvous secure. All personnel accounted for. No pursuit detected. Status?" "Secure for now," Elena replied. "Maintaining radio discipline. We'll contact at scheduled intervals." She turned back to Winters, who was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Your new team," he observed. "Military?" "Some," Elena acknowledged, not offering details. "People I trust." "Trust," Winters repeated, the word carrying weight. "Something in short supply these days." Elena met his gaze directly. "Which brings us back to the question. Why should I trust you, James? You've been alive for 3 years, gathering evidence, building a case. Why contact me now after all this time?" Winters sank onto the edge of the camp bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "Because I've hit a wall, Elena. I can't get close enough to the heart of Aegis on my own. I can document their operations, track their personnel, but I can't access the core of Project Safeguard. And time is running out." "What do you mean?" "They're moving to full production next week," Winters explained, pulling up a calendar on his laptop. "Once that happens, stopping them becomes exponentially more difficult. The weapons will be distributed to secure locations across the country, ready for deployment on command." Elena processed this information, tactical assessments forming automatically. So we need to hit them before production begins. Disable the facility, secure the evidence, expose the entire operation. Exactly, but it's not that simple, Winters cautioned. The production facility is a fortress, state-of-the-art security, armed guards, biometric access controls. I've been monitoring it for weeks, looking for vulnerabilities, but a direct assault would be suicide. Who said anything about direct? Elena countered, the gears of her tactical mind already turning. Sometimes the best approach is indirect. Create a diversion, exploit a secondary vulnerability, achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. A spark of hope flickered in Winter's eyes. That's why I needed you, Elena. Not just for your combat skills, but for your strategic thinking. You always saw angles others missed. I'll need full intel on the facility, Elena said. All business now. Layout, security protocols, personnel rotations, access points, and I need to brief my team. Winters hesitated, old caution reasserting itself. How much do they know about Echo Team? About Aegis? Enough, Elena replied. And they've earned my trust, which means they've earned a chance at yours. One of them lost his father, a Marine who worked briefly for Aegis before dying under suspicious circumstances. Another has been investigating a pattern of veteran deaths linked to Aegis operations. These aren't random civilians, James. They're professionals with a stake in this fight. After a moment's consideration, Winters nodded. All right, but we move carefully, share information on a need-to-know basis. Aegis has a history of infiltrating investigation teams, corrupting evidence chains, eliminating witnesses. Agreed, Alice. Agreed, but now show me everything you have on the production facility. For the next hour, they pored over schematics, security protocols, and personnel files. The Aegis production facility was indeed formidable. Built into the mountainside, multiple security layers, compartmentalized access, armed response teams on constant standby. There is one potential vulnerability, Winters noted, pointing to a section of the schematic. The power substation for the East Wing. It's technically outside the main security perimeter, controlled by a separate system. If we could access it, create a localized outage, it would trigger emergency protocols, Elena continued, following his logic. Security would shift to critical areas first, creating a temporary gap we could exploit. Exactly, but we'd need precise timing, coordinated approach, and a valid reason to be on site if challenged. Elena considered this, remembering something from earlier. You mentioned Aegis uses these tunnels for storage and movement. How close do they come to the facility? Within a quarter-mile at the closest point, Winters confirmed, but those sections are monitored, patrolled. But if we could access them undetected, we'd have a covered approach almost to the perimeter fence, Elena noted. Combined with a power disruption, it could work. Their planning was interrupted by Elena's comm unit. Gunny, we have a situation, Harrison's voice reported. A young woman approached our position, asking for you specifically. Says she has information about Operation Midnight Shadow. Elena froze. Operation Midnight Shadow was the classified designation of Echo Team's final mission. Information that only someone with high-level clearance or direct connection to the mission would know. Description? She asked sharply. Middle Eastern descent, mid-20s, speaks with a slight accent. Says her name is Amira. The name struck Elena like a physical blow. Amira, the name of the baby born on the evacuation helicopter from Fallujah, the child named after her. It couldn't possibly be the same person. That child would be too young, but the coincidence was too striking to ignore. Is she alone? Elena asked. Appears to be, no weapons visible. She seems nervous, keeps looking over her shoulder. Elena made a quick decision. Secure her, but treat her as a friendly until proven otherwise. I'm on my way back, ETA 30 minutes. Copy that. Harrison out. Elena turned to Winters, who had been listening intently. I need to go. My team may be in danger. I'm coming with you, he said, already gathering his essential gear. If this Amira knows about Midnight Shadow, she's either Aegis or someone with valuable information. Either way, I need to be there. Elena hesitated, still not entirely comfortable trusting Winters after his revelation that he'd suspected her of betraying the team. But practical considerations won out. His knowledge of Aegis operations and personnel could be crucial if they were walking into a trap. Fine, she conceded, but you follow my lead. These are my people. They moved swiftly through the mining tunnels, Winters leading them along a different route that emerged from the mountainside nearly a mile from where they had entered. The night had deepened around them, the forest cloaked in shadow, the moon occasionally breaking through the cloud cover above. As they approached the rendezvous point, Elena signaled for Winters to hang back while she made initial contact. Let me assess the situation first. My team doesn't know you, and tensions will be high. Winters nodded, melting into the shadows with practiced ease. Elena approached the clearing carefully, using the recognition signal they had established. 3 short clicks on her tactical light, followed by 2 long ones. Harrison's voice came from the darkness. All clear, Gunny. We're at your 3 o'clock. Elena moved toward his position, finding the team gathered in a defensive perimeter around a young woman seated on a fallen log. As Elena entered the small clearing, all eyes turned to her, relief evident in their expressions. Status? She asked Harrison. Secure for now, but we should move soon. We've detected vehicle movement on the main road, about 2 miles east. Elena nodded, then turned her attention to the visitor. The young woman stood as Elena approached, her posture tense but determined. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent eyes that studied Elena intently. You're Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, she said, not a question but a statement of fact. Her accent was subtle but detectable. Middle Eastern, possibly Iraqi or Afghan. I've been looking for you for a very long time. You have me at a disadvantage, Elena replied cautiously. You know who I am, but I don't know you. My name is Amira Khalil. The young woman reached slowly into her jacket, telegraphing her movements to avoid appearing threatening, and withdrew a small photograph. This was given to me by my mother. Elena took the photograph, using her tactical light to illuminate it. The image showed a much younger version of herself, still in combat gear, standing next to a Middle Eastern woman holding a newborn baby. The background was clearly a military medical tent. Written on the back in faded ink was a simple message. To Elena, who gave us a future. Fallujah, 2004. Elena looked up, stunned realization washing over her. You're the baby, the one born on the evacuation helicopter. Amira nodded, a small smile breaking through her serious expression. My mother named me after you, Elena Amira Khalil. She told me the story every year on my birthday, how 3 Marines held a schoolhouse against impossible odds, how they saved 37 civilians, including my pregnant mother, how one of those Marines, a woman named Elena, carried my mother to the helicopter while under fire, how I was born during the flight to safety. The memory washed over Elena, the chaos of the evacuation, the young pregnant woman going into labor as the helicopter lifted off, the makeshift delivery conducted by a harried medic while Elena held the woman's hand. Whispered encouragements in broken Arabic. Your mother, Elena said softly. Is she? She's alive and well, Amira assured her. Living in Michigan now, a professor of literature at the university. She's the one who encouraged me to become a journalist, to use words as weapons for truth. And how did you find me? How do you know about Operation Midnight Shadow? Amira's expression grew serious again. I've been investigating Aegis Defense for the past 2 years. Their involvement in arms dealing, their connections to suspicious deaths among military whistleblowers. 6 months ago, I came across a reference to Echo Team and Operation Midnight Shadow in some classified documents that were leaked to me by a source inside Aegis. What source? Elena asked sharply. I don't know their real identity. They used encrypted channels, code names, but they provided credible information, including the fact that not all members of Echo Team died in the Hindu Kush as officially reported. Elena exchanged a glance with Harrison, who nodded slightly, confirming they were thinking the same thing. This could be the break they needed, or it could be an elaborate setup. Why come to me now? Why here? Because Aegis is moving forward with Project Safeguard, Amira said urgently. My source sent me the production timeline. They're preparing for deployment within 72 hours. After that, it becomes much harder to stop. The timeline matched what Winters had told her. Elena made a decision. Winters, she called softly, you can come out now. Out. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, James Winters emerged, causing a ripple of tension through the group. Murphy and Harrison immediately moved their hands toward concealed weapons, recognizing a potential threat. "It's okay," Elena assured them. "This is Captain James Winters, former commanding officer of Echo Team. He's the one who sent the message." Amira's eyes widened in recognition. "You're alive," she breathed. "My source said there might be survivors, but I never expected—" "Your source," Winters interrupted, his voice tense. "Did they identify themselves as Nightingale?" Amira nodded slowly, surprise evident on her face. "Yes. How did you know?" Winters turned to Elena, his expression grave. "Nightingale was the code name for Lieutenant Sarah Mackenzie, our intelligence officer. If Amira's source used that name, then Mackenzie might be alive too," Elena finished, hope flaring unexpectedly in her chest. "But you said she died in your arms on the ridge." "I thought she had," Winters admitted. "No pulse, massive blood loss. But if she somehow survived—" "Then we have another ally," Murphy interjected, joining the conversation. "And potentially more evidence against Aegis." "Or it could be someone using her code name to lure us out," Tom pointed out, ever the cautious law enforcement officer. Amira reached into her bag and produced a small laptop. "I can prove my source is legitimate. They provided me with files on Project Safeguard, testing protocols, deployment strategies, target priorities, information that only someone with inside access would have." As she opened the laptop, a distant sound caught Elena's attention, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors growing steadily louder. "We need to move," she said urgently. "That's no civilian aircraft at this hour." "There's an old hunting cabin about 3 miles west," Viper offered, speaking up for the first time since the confrontation at Murphy's. "Isolated, defensible, off any regular patrol routes." "Lead the way," Elena ordered. "Murphy, you and Harrison take point with Viper. Tom, cover our 6. Maria, stay with Amira. Winters, you're with me." As the team began to move, she added, "And Amira, I want to hear everything your source told you, every detail." The old hunting cabin stood in a small clearing, its weathered timber wall blending with the surrounding forest. Inside, the team had established a temporary base of operations, using the rustic space with military efficiency. Maps and documents covered the rough-hewn table. Communications equipment had been set up in one corner, and weapons were arranged for quick access. Elena stood at the head of the table, surveying her unlikely squad. In the hours since their retreat from the rendezvous point, a sense of unified purpose had emerged among them, transcending their disparate backgrounds. "Let's put it all together," she said, her voice steady and authoritative. "What do we know? What do we need to know? And what's our timeline?" Winter stepped forward, pointing to a satellite image of a facility nestled in the mountains. "This is the Aegis Research and Production Facility where Project Safeguard is being manufactured. According to the information Amira received, they're preparing for full-scale production within 72 hours. Which gives us less than 3 days to stop them," Murphy added grimly. "What exactly are we looking at in terms of security?" Harrison asked, examining the facility layout. "State-of-the-art," Winters replied. "Perimeter fencing, electronic surveillance, armed guards, former military and private security contractors, interior biometric access controls, compartmentalized security zones. They've built it like a fortress." "And our objective?" Tom inquired, the tactical officer in him focusing on mission parameters. Elena traced her finger along the facility schematic. "Twofold. First, we need to access their central data servers and extract all information related to Project Safeguard, research protocols, test results, deployment plans, financial records, everything that proves what they're doing and who's involved. And second," Winters continued, "we need to disable their production capability, destroy the chemical agents, sabotage the manufacturing equipment, ensure they can't move forward while we get the evidence to the proper authorities." "Proper authorities?" Viper questioned skeptically. "If Aegis has infiltrated government agencies, military command, intelligence services, who exactly can we trust with this information?" It was a valid concern, one that had been troubling Elena as well. "We need to create maximum exposure," she said after a moment's thought. "Multiple channels simultaneously, law enforcement, military oversight committees, intelligence community inspectors general, and the press." She nodded toward Amira. That's where you come in. I have contacts at major news outlets, Amira confirmed. People who will run the story if the evidence is solid. And I've been building a case against Aegis for months. Documentation of their arms dealing, connections to suspicious deaths, financial irregularities. Jake, who had been quietly listening until now, spoke up. What about my father and the other veterans who died after working for Aegis? Will this exposure bring them justice? Elena met his gaze directly. That's part of the mission, Jake. Your father and others like him were silenced because they knew too much. By exposing Aegis's operations, we honor their sacrifice and ensure they didn't die in vain. Jake nodded, a mix of determination and grief crossing his young face. Then count me in, whatever it takes. Speaking of which, Maria interjected, what exactly is our insertion plan? We're talking about a heavily fortified facility with trained security personnel. Even with our combined experience, we're outnumbered and outgunned. Elena turned to Winters. That's where your insider knowledge comes in. You've been monitoring this facility. What vulnerabilities have you identified? Winters pulled out detailed schematics of the Aegis complex. There are 3 potential entry points. The main gate is heavily guarded, obviously not an option. The service entrance on the east side has lighter security, but still regular patrols. But here, he pointed to a section of the perimeter near a steep ravine, is where we have our best chance. The terrain is considered too treacherous for approach, so they've reduced security coverage. 1 camera, minimal motion sensors, no regular patrol path. What about inside? Harrison asked, studying the layout. Once we breach the perimeter, what are we facing? The facility is divided into 3 primary zones, Winters explained. Administrative in the front, research and development in the center, production in the rear. Our targets are in R&D and production. Security checkpoints between zones, biometric access controls, internal cameras throughout. Can we hack in? Murphy questioned. Disable security systems remotely? Winters shook his head. The critical systems are air-gapped. No external network connection. We'd need physical access to their security control room. Which creates a chicken and egg problem, Tom observed dryly. We need to disable security to get in, but we need to get in to disable security. As they continued discussing tactical options, Elena noticed Viper shifting uncomfortably by the cabin door, his expression troubled. When the team took a brief break to review documents and refresh supplies, Elena approached him. Something on your mind? She asked quietly. Viper glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. I need to tell you something, Gunny. Something I should have said earlier. Elena led him outside, away from the others. What is it? Viper shifted uneasily, struggling to find the right words. When you found me, when I came to Murphy's that morning, I wasn't just there because of the photo, because I recognized you. I was there because I'd been ordered to approach you. Elena's posture stiffened immediately. Explain. After Aegis tried to recruit some of my guys, after they broke into my place to send that warning, they came back a week later. Different approach this time. Said they knew about my history, my dishonorable discharge, the Desert Vipers. Said they could make all my legal problem go away if I did one simple job for Orston. Monitoring me, Elena guessed, her voice flat. Viper nodded miserably. They knew you were at Murphy's, knew who you had been, wanted me to get close, report on your activities, your contacts. I agreed because I was scared, because I thought I could play both sides. And now? Elena's hand had moved subtly closer to her concealed weapon. Now I'm telling you the truth because I want you to know where I stand, Viper said earnestly. What happened at Murphy's, the way you handled things, the way you talked about service and dignity, it reminded me of who I used to be, who I should have remained. I haven't reported back to them, haven't told them anything about our plans. Elena studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception. Why tell me this now, right before the operation? Because you deserve to know. Because if we're going into this together, there can't be secrets between us. Viper met her gaze directly. I betrayed my oath once before when I stole from the army. I won't betray it again. Not to Aegis, not to anyone. Elena was silent for a long moment, weighing his confession against the risk he now presented. If you're playing me, Viper, if this is some elaborate setup, it's not, he insisted. I'm telling you the truth, all of it. And I'll prove it tomorrow when we go in. Who's your contact at Aegis? Elena demanded. Names, protocols, everything. Viper didn't hesitate. Man named Garrett, no last name given, meets me at a diner in Oceanside every Wednesday. I call a specific number the day before to confirm. Always pays in cash, never discusses anything sensitive in the open. Just asks for updates, gives instructions. The details had this ring of truth, the tradecraft of someone experienced in handling assets, but not particularly concerned about this one. Still, Elena wasn't ready to dismiss the potential threat. You understand I need to inform the others. Viper nodded, resignation in his eyes. I figured you would, and I'll accept whatever they decide. If you want me out of the operation, I'm out. No arguments. Elena considered her options. Removing Viper now would mean adjusting the plan, potentially compromising its effectiveness. But keeping him involved carried its own risks. Finally, she made her decision. You're still in, but with modifications. You'll remain with Tom for the diversion, but he'll be briefed on your situation, and you'll surrender any communication devices now, to be returned only after the operation is complete. Relief washed over Viper's face. Thank you, Gunny. I won't let you down. See that you don't, Elena replied coolly. Because if anything goes wrong tomorrow that suggests inside knowledge, you'll be my first suspect. And I promise you, Viper, you don't want that. When they returned to the cabin, Elena briefed Murphy and Harrison on Viper's confession. Both men absorbed the information with professional detachment, weighing operational concerns against security risks. It could work to our advantage, Murphy suggested, after careful consideration. If his Aegis handler is expecting a regular report and doesn't receive one, they might assume communications difficulties rather than betrayal. But if Viper suddenly disappears entirely, they might accelerate whatever they're planning, Harrison finished. I agree. Keep him in the operation, but compartmentalize his knowledge and maintain constant supervision. With that settled, they returned to mission planning. The team would split into two groups. Elena and Winters would access the facility through the ravine approach, while Tom and Viper would create a diversion at the service entrance. Harrison and Murphy would coordinate from outside the perimeter, managing communications and preparing extraction routes. Maria would stage near the perimeter with medical supplies, while Jake and Amira would remain at the cabin, preparing to distribute the evidence if the team failed to return. We move at 0200 tomorrow, Elena concluded. That gives us 18 hours to gather supplies, finalize our plan, and get some rest. Questions? Just one, Viper said, his expression serious despite his compromised position. Do we have a name for this operation? In my experience, the good ones always have a name. Despite the tension, a few smiles appeared around the table. Elena considered for a moment. Operation Echo Justice, she said finally. For our fallen team, and for everyone who's been silenced by Aegis. Echo Justice, Harrison repeated, nodding approvingly. Fitting. As the team dispersed to begin preparations, Elena found herself momentarily alone with the satellite image of the Aegis facility. She traced its outline with her finger, the weight of command settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow they would attempt to penetrate one of the most secure private facilities in the country, confronting a powerful organization with connections at the highest levels of government. The stakes couldn't be higher, not just their own lives, but potentially those of countless others who would be affected by Project Safeguard if they failed. Yet despite the danger, Elena felt a clarity of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about completing a mission or exposing corruption. It was about justice for fallen comrades, for Jake's father, for all the veterans who had been used and discarded by a system that valued profit over people. As she studied the facility schematic, identifying approach vectors and security vulnerabilities, Elena felt the full weight of her responsibility. These people, her new team, were risking everything based on her judgment, her leadership. The thought should have been crushing, but instead, it centered her, focused her mind with crystalline clarity. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez was back on mission, and this mission was personal. While the team continued preparations for the coming operation, Elena took a moment to step outside the cabin. The mountain air was crisp against her skin, the forest peaceful in its indifference to human concerns. She needed this brief solitude to process everything that had happened since the confrontation with the desert vipers at Murphy's Roadhouse. In less than 24 hours, her carefully constructed civilian identity had been completely dismantled. The quiet server who poured coffee and wiped tables was gone, replaced by the warrior she had tried to leave behind. And now she stood at the center of an operation that could expose one of the most dangerous conspiracies ever to threaten American democracy from within. The cabin door opened behind her, and Murphy stepped out, his movements nearly silent despite his age, the ingrained habits of a career intelligence officer. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, offering a steaming mug of coffee. Elena accepted gratefully, the familiar aroma providing a small comfort amid the chaos. "You know, for 6 months, I thought you were just an absentee bar owner who called in daily to check the receipts." Murphy smiled slightly. "That was the idea. Best covers are the ones with just enough presence to establish legitimacy, but not enough to draw attention." He settled beside her on a fallen log. "You weren't the only one watching, Gunny." "How long have you been tracking Aegis?" Elena asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Nearly 2 years," Murphy replied, his expression turning serious. "It started with a pattern I noticed. Veterans with specialized skills taking jobs with private contractors, then dying under suspicious circumstances months later. Suicides, accidents, overdoses, all with similar profiles. And all after showing signs of distress or attempting to communicate concerns about their employers. Like Jake's father." Murphy nodded. "Staff Sergeant Lewis was one of the first cases that caught my attention. Distinguished service record, stable family life, no history of mental health issues. Then 6 months with Aegis, and suddenly he puts his service weapon in his mouth? It didn't add up." "So you bought a roadside bar near a major military base to gather intelligence," Elena observed, seeing the strategy behind the seemingly odd career choice for a former DIA officer. Murphy's Roadhouse sits at the intersection of multiple communities: active duty military, veterans, civilian contractors, local law enforcement. People talk in bars, let their guard down, share things they wouldn't in formal settings. Murphy took a sip of his coffee. "I was building a case piece by piece when you walked in 6 months ago looking for a job. You recognized me." "I had my suspicions," he acknowledged. "Your service record wasn't easy to access, most of it redacted or classified, but there were enough breadcrumbs for someone who knew where to look. Force recon, multiple combat deployments, high-level commendations, then suddenly off the grid following a classified operation in 2010. Why not approach me directly? Why the charade of being the absent owner?" Murphy's expression turned rueful. "In my experience, people running from something don't respond well to direct confrontation. You clearly wanted anonymity, needed it for reasons I couldn't fully determine. I decided to give you space, observe, build trust gradually." "While using me as potential bait," Elena noted, without rancor. "It was a tactical decision she might have made herself under similar circumstances." "Not bait," Murphy corrected. "An asset with unique knowledge and skills who might eventually become an ally. I never anticipated the Desert Vipers forcing your hand, revealing your identity so publicly." Elena nodded, understanding his approach. "And Harrison? Tom? Were they part of your investigation from the beginning?" "Harrison and I served together before I joined DI. When I started noticing the pattern with Aegis, he was one of the first people I contacted, someone with the connections and credibility to help navigate military channels. Tom came in later, after a veteran in his jurisdiction died under circumstances similar to the others. He reached out through law enforcement networks, eventually connecting with our informal investigation." "And Maria?" "Pure coincidence," Murphy admitted. "I had no idea she was a former corpsman until last night. Sometimes the universe aligns resources when you need them most." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Finally, Elena voiced the question that had been troubling her since discovering Murphy's true identity. "Why didn't you tell me about Jake's father? If you suspected Aegis was responsible, if you knew about my connection to them through Echo Team." Murphy sighed heavily. "I considered it many times. But without concrete evidence linking Aegis to Echo Team's ambush, without confirmation that you were ready to confront that past, it seemed an unnecessary risk." Jake was struggling with his own grief, and you were clearly still healing from whatever happened in that mountain range. And now? Now we have Winters, Amira, the evidence from Nightingale, pieces coming together in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Murphy turned to face her directly. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? Not just the operation itself, but what follows if we succeed. Congressional hearings, federal investigations, media scrutiny, your anonymity will be gone forever. Elena considered this, the full implications settling heavily on her shoulders. For 3 years, she had hidden from her past, from the person she had been. Tomorrow's operation wouldn't just expose Aegis, it would expose her as well, bringing her back into the light she had fled. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted finally, but I know I can't keep running. Echo Team deserves justice. Jake's father deserves justice. All the veterans Aegis has used and discarded deserve justice. She met Murphy's gaze with renewed determination. If that means sacrificing my anonymity, my peace, then so be it. Murphy nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. That's why I hired you, Elena, not just for your combat skills or tactical thinking, but for your integrity. Some things are worth fighting for, even at great personal cost. As they finished their coffee, Elena's mind turned to the operation ahead. Tell me about the production facility. What else do we know beyond what Winters has shared? Not much, Murphy admitted. Aegis compartmentalizes information ruthlessly. Even their own employees rarely understand the full scope of operations. But we do know they've been moving significant resources to that mountain facility over the past 6 months. Specialized equipment, chemical precursors, security personnel with backgrounds in WMD protection. And the chemical agent itself, what are we dealing with? According to what Amira received from Nightingale, it's a binary compound. 2 relatively harmless chemicals that become lethal when combined. Causes respiratory failure that mimics natural causes or exacerbates existing conditions. Virtually untraceable in standard autopsies. Perfect for eliminating troublesome individuals or controlling civil unrest with plausible deniability, Elena observed grimly. Exactly, and with their connections in government and law enforcement, they could deploy it with minimal oversight or accountability. The implications were chilling. A private organization with the capability to eliminate opposition through what appeared to be natural deaths. The ultimate tool for maintaining power and silencing dissent. We need to destroy not just the production capability, but all research data, formulas, testing protocols, Elena decided. Ensure they can't simply rebuild elsewhere. Agreed, Murphy said, but that complicates our mission significantly. Data will be stored in multiple locations, backed up on secure servers. Then we prioritize, Elena stated. Physical production capability first, central data repository second, with copies of everything we can access for public exposure. We can't eliminate all traces of Project Safeguard, but we can set them back years and expose enough to trigger formal investigations. Murphy nodded, the former intelligence officer approving her strategic assessment. A realistic approach, and speaking of realism, we should discuss contingencies if the operation fails. If we're compromised, if we don't return, the evidence goes to Amira, Elena said without hesitation. She releases everything through multiple channels simultaneously. Law enforcement, congressional committees, international courts, media outlets, maximum exposure impossible to contain. And the team? Each person needs to understand the risks, the potential consequences. They already do, Elena assured him. No one's here under false pretenses or misunderstanding the stakes. This is voluntary service, freely chosen despite the dangers. As they returned to the cabin, Elena found the team engaged in final preparations. Weapons were being checked, communications equipment tested, tactics reviewed. Each person moved with purpose and focus, professionals united by a common mission despite their diverse backgrounds. Elena felt a surge of pride witnessing their dedication. These weren't soldiers following orders or mercenaries motivated by payment. They were citizens choosing to stand against corruption and abuse of power, risking everything to protect principles they believed in. As she rejoined them, adding her expertise to the planning process, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had fled from the ambush in the Hindu Kush, carrying the weight of survivor's guilt and the burden of unfinished business. Tomorrow, she would return to the fight, not as a lone survivor, but as the leader of a team united by purpose and principle. Whatever happened in the coming hours, Elena Rodriguez was no longer running from her past. She was facing it head-on, with allies at her side and clarity in her heart. The warrior had not just returned, she had found her most important mission yet. As sunset approached, casting long shadows through the cabin windows, the team gathered for a final briefing. Elena stood at the head of the table, the natural authority she had suppressed for years now fully evident in her bearing. Final review, she began. We move out at 200 hours. Two-vehicle approach to the drop point 3 miles from the target. From there, we proceed on foot to our respective positions. Comms check every 15 minutes using the established protocol. If anyone misses 2 consecutive checks, we assume compromise and move to contingency plan alpha. She pointed to specific locations on the facility schematic. Tom and Viper will initiate the diversion at the service entrance at precisely 0320 hours. Enough noise and confusion to draw security response, but not enough to trigger full facility lockdown. Winters and I will breach through the ravine access point during the resulting security shift. Once inside, Winters continued, we'll proceed to the R&D section first, access their central data repository, and extract all files related to Project Safeguard. Then we move to the production facility, plant charges at these key structural points. He indicated several locations on the blueprint, and exfiltrate through the same access point. Extraction vehicles will be positioned here and here, Murphy added, indicating 2 locations on a larger area map. Primary and backup, with alternative routes mapped for various contingencies. Questions? Elena asked, looking around the table. What's our response protocol if we encounter Keller or other high-value Aegis personnel? Harrison inquired. We're not there for capture or elimination, Elena stated firmly. Our objectives are the evidence and disabling the production facility. If we encounter Keller or others, we avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary for mission completion or team safety. And if we encounter Mackenzie, Winters asked, his voice carefully neutral. If Lieutenant Mackenzie is at the facility and can be safely extracted, we bring her out, Elena decided, but not at the expense of the primary objectives. The evidence and destruction of the chemical agents take priority. Amira, who had been listening intently, spoke up. I prepared secure channels for evidence distribution, law enforcement, congressional oversight committees, trusted journalists. If anything happens to the team, I'm ready to release everything we have. Good, Elena acknowledged. Now everyone gets some rest. We move in 6 hours. As the team dispersed to make final preparations, Elena noticed a subtle ritual taking place. Around the table, each person was writing something on small slips of paper, folding them carefully, and placing them in an envelope that Harrison held. What's going on? She asked. Harrison looked up, a solemn expression on his weathered face. Letters home, he explained simply. Just in case. The tradition was familiar to Elena from her deployment days. Last messages to loved ones, to be delivered only if the writer didn't return. It was a practical acknowledgement of the danger they faced, a final act of care for those left behind. She hesitated, then joined them at the table. Who would she write to? Her parents were long gone, no siblings, no spouse or children. The life of a special operator had left little room for deep personal connections outside the military family. In the end, she wrote a single letter addressed to the patrons of Murphy's Roadhouse, the civilians she had served quietly for 6 months, the veterans who had become an unexpected community. She thanked them for giving her a place to belong, for accepting her without knowing who she had been, for helping her remember what it meant to serve in ways both large and small. As she sealed her letter and added it to the others, Elena felt a curious sense of completion. Whatever happened tomorrow, she had found her way back to herself, back to the core values that had guided her throughout her military career. The night deepened around the cabin, stars wheeling overhead, the forest alive with small sounds. Inside, the unlikely team rested as best they could, each person finding their own way to prepare for what lay ahead. Elena moved among them, offering a word of encouragement here, a tactical reminder there, the calm presence of a leader who had faced combat before and would do so again. In a few hours, they would set out on a mission with stakes higher than most of them had ever encountered. Not just their own lives, but potentially those of countless others who would be affected by Project Safeguard if they failed. But as she looked at the determined faces around her, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Confidence, not just in herself, but in those who would stand beside her. They were an improbable force, brought together by circumstance and choice, united by a common purpose that transcended their differences. Operation Echo Justice was about to begin, and with it, the final chapter in a story that had started 3 years ago on a blood-soaked mountain in Afghanistan. Whatever the outcome, Elena was ready to face it. Not alone, as she had been for so long, but surrounded by a new team, a new family forged in the crucible of shared danger and shared purpose. As midnight approached, she stepped outside one last time, looking up at the vast canopy of stars above. Somewhere in that infinite expanse, she imagined, the spirits of Echo Team watched over her. Williams, Chen, Rodriguez, Wright, Blackburn, and perhaps Mackenzie too, if the lieutenant hadn't survived as Nightingale. The fallen comrades she had mourned in silence for 3 years. "We're finishing what we started," she whispered to the night sky. "All of us, together." And in the gentle breeze that stirred the pine needles around her, Elena almost thought she heard a response. The quiet affirmation of warriors who had gone before, blessing the mission of those who carried on their fight. 2 minutes to insertion point, Murphy's voice came through Elena's comm unit, calm and professional despite the tension of the moment. "All systems go. No alert status detected at the facility." Elena acknowledged with a terse copy as she and Winters made their final approach to the ravine access point. The night had cooperated with their mission, clouds obscuring the moon and stars, providing additional cover for their stealthy advance. Both wore dark tactical gear, faces darkened with camouflage paint, moving with the practiced silence of experienced operators. Behind them, the rest of the team had deployed to their assigned positions, Tom and Viper preparing for the diversion at the service entrance, Harrison and Murphy coordinating from a secure observation post, Maria and Jake standing by at the medical staging point, Amira monitoring communications from the cabin, ready to implement the evidence distribution protocol if necessary. As they reached the edge of the ravine, Elena and Winters paused for a final equipment check. Specialized cutting tools for the perimeter fence, electronic countermeasures for the security systems, encrypted data drives for extracting information, remote detonated charges for disabling the production facility. Everything in place, everything verified. "Remember," Elena said quietly, "R&D section first for the data, then production facility for the charges. 30 minutes maximum inside the perimeter. If we're not out by then..." "The team initiates contingency alpha," Winters finished. "I remember." He hesitated, then added, "Elena, if we encounter Nightingale, if Mackenzie really is alive and inside..." "We'll get her out if we can," Elena assured him. "But the mission comes first. She'd be the first to insist on that." Winters nodded, accepting the priority with the pragmatism of a seasoned operator. They began their descent into the ravine, navigating the treacherous terrain with careful precision. The approach to the Aegis facility through this route was challenging by design: steep slopes, loose rocks, minimal cover, deterrents that had allowed the security team to reduce surveillance in this sector. "Security camera at 2 o'clock, Winters whispered as they neared the bottom. "Pan pattern is 15 seconds left, 5-second pause, 15 seconds right." Elena confirmed his observation, timing the camera's movement. "We move during the right pan. That gives us the longest window to reach the fence." They waited in silence, counting seconds, then moved precisely as the camera swung away from their position. Reaching the perimeter fence, Winters produced the specialized cutting tool designed for minimal noise. Working quickly, he created an opening just large enough for them to slip through. "We're in," Elena reported via comm, proceeding to Phase 1 position. They advanced toward the main facility, using shadows and blind spots in the security system that Winters had identified during his surveillance. When they reached the exterior wall of the research and development section, Elena checked her watch again. 2 minutes to diversion. Prepare for breach. Winters retrieved a small device from his pack, a specialized electronic bypass for the security door ahead of them. "This will give us 30 seconds once I activate it. The system will register a momentary power fluctuation, then reset. Make it count, Elena said, positioning herself to move immediately when the door unlocked. At precisely 0320 hours, the night erupted with sound and light from the opposite side of the facility. Even at their distance, they could hear the concussive boom of the diversionary explosives Tom and Viper had planted. Diversion initiated, came Tom's calm voice over the comm. Security responding as anticipated. Elena watched as floodlights swiveled toward the disturbance, guard patrols converging on the apparent threat. Now, she said to Winters, who immediately activated the bypass device. The security door's indicator light flashed from red to green, and they slipped inside, finding themselves in a utilitarian corridor with sterile white walls and fluorescent lighting. Emergency lights flashed and distant alarms could be heard, but their immediate area remained clear as security personnel responded to the diversion. "We're in," Elena reported, proceeding to target Alpha. According to the facility schematics Winters had provided, the central data servers for Project Safeguard were located on the second floor of the R&D section. They moved efficiently through the corridors, encountering no resistance in the initial phase of their infiltration. "Security is concentrated on the east perimeter," Harrison updated them from command. "You have approximately 6 minutes before they realize it's a diversion." "Copy that," Elena acknowledged, as they reached a stairwell and began their ascent. The second floor was eerily quiet, most personnel having evacuated or responded to the security alert. They moved quickly to a set of reinforced doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only." "Biometric lock," Winters observed, examining the access panel. "Retinal scanner and palm print." Elena frowned. "Options?" "I came prepared." Winters retrieved another specialized device from his pack. "This will spoof the system, but it's going to trigger a secondary alert when it succeeds. We'll have 3 minutes maximum before security responds." "Do it," Elena decided, taking up a defensive position to cover their rear. Winters attached the device to the access panel and activated it. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the doors unlocked. "We're in," Winters reported, as they entered a climate-controlled room filled with server, racks, and workstations. "This is it, the Project Safeguard database." Elena secured the door behind them while Winters moved to the main console. "How long to extract the data?" 2 minutes to bypass security, another minute to copy everything," he replied, fingers flying over the keyboard. "Assuming they haven't changed the architecture since my last intelligence update." While Winters worked, Elena maintained vigilance, her attention divided between monitoring their surroundings and checking in with the rest of the team. "Status report," she requested over the comm. "Diversion holding," Tom responded. "Security still engaged, but they're starting to realize something's off." "Medical station secure," Maria added. "No activity in our sector." "Command monitoring all channels," Harrison confirmed. "Chatter suggests they're initiating a facility-wide search protocol. You need to accelerate." "Working on it," Winters replied, his focus entirely on the system before him. "Accessing primary database now. Encryption bypassed. Beginning data extraction." Elena's attention was drawn to a security monitor on the wall, which showed multiple guards moving through the corridors on their floor. "We've got company inbound. How much longer?" 60 seconds, Winters answered, not looking up from his task. The approaching footsteps grew louder, voices calling to each other as security personnel coordinated their search. Elena positioned herself beside the door, weapon ready, calculating odds and options. 40 seconds, Winters updated, the tension evident in his voice. The footsteps stopped just outside their door. Elena heard the electronic beep of a security badge being scanned, followed by a puzzled exclamation when the system denied access due to Winters' device still being attached. "Something's wrong with the server room access," a voice said from the corridor. "Calling it in." 30 seconds, Winters whispered urgently. Elena made a rapid decision. "We need a diversion within the diversion," she said quietly. Keying her comm, she added, "Tom, we need additional noise on the east side right now." "Copy that," Tom responded immediately. "Secondary package deploying in 5. Another explosion rocked the facility, this one closer to their position, but still on the opposite side of the building. As hoped, the security personnel outside their door immediately responded to the new threat. "Server room can wait," one of them called out. All units respond to East Sector breach. The footsteps receded rapidly, giving them a momentary reprieve. Done, Winters announced triumphantly, removing a data drive from the console. Everything on Project Safeguard, research, testing, deployment plans, financial records, personnel files, it's all here. Confirm data integrity, Elena instructed as they prepared to move to their next objective. Winters quickly connected the drive to a small tablet, running a verification program. Data intact. We've got it all. Target Alpha secured, Elena reported over the comm. Moving to Target Bravo. They exited the server room cautiously, finding the corridor momentarily clear. According to their plan, they now needed to reach the production facility at the rear of the complex, where the chemical agents for Project Safeguard were being manufactured. As they descended back to the first floor, Elena's comm crackled with Harrison's urgent voice. Be advised, facility security protocols have escalated. They're implementing full lockdown procedures. Estimated time to complete lockdown? Elena asked as they quickened their pace. 3 minutes. All interior doors will seal, compartmentalizing the facility. We need to move faster, Elena decided, abandoning stealth for speed as they raced through the corridors toward the production section. They encountered 2 security guards at the transition point between R&D and production. Before the guards could react, Elena and Winters neutralized them with practiced efficiency, non-lethal takedowns that left both men unconscious but unharmed. 30 seconds to lockdown, Harrison warned as they reached the final security door separating them from their target. This one's reinforced, Winters observed grimly. We won't get through with the bypass alone. Elena made a snap decision. Plan B, she announced, retrieving a small shaped charge from her pack. Stand back. She placed the explosive precisely at the door's weakest point, where the electronic lock mechanism connected to the frame, and set a 5-second timer. Breaching charge deployed, she reported, as they took cover around a corner. Fire in the hole. The controlled explosion was louder than she would have liked, but it achieved its purpose. The door's locking mechanism was destroyed, allowing them to force it open manually just as the facility-wide lockdown engaged. We're through, Elena confirmed. Entering production area now. The production facility was a stark contrast to the administrative and R&D sections. Massive industrial equipment filled the space, mixing tanks, chemical storage containers, automated packaging systems, all designed for the efficient production of Project Safeguard's lethal agents. Begin placing charges, Elena directed, as they moved through the facility. Priority targets are the primary mixing station, chemical storage, and control systems. Winters nodded, retrieving several compact explosive devices from his pack. These are set for remote detonation. Once placed, we can trigger them from up to 2 miles away. They work quickly, placing charges at the crucial points identified in their planning. Elena was securing the final explosive on the main control panel when a voice behind them froze her in place. I must say, I'm impressed by your persistence, Sergeant Rodriguez. Elena turned slowly to find Richard Keller standing at the entrance to the production floor, flanked by 4 armed security personnel. The Aegis CEO wore a custom-tailored suit that seemed out of place in the industrial setting, his silver hair perfectly styled, his posture relaxed despite the situation. Keller, she acknowledged, her mind racing through tactical options. I thought we'd eliminated all of Echo Team 3 years ago, Keller continued conversationally. An unfortunate necessity, given what you'd discovered. And yet, here you are, you and Captain Winters both, proving remarkably difficult to kill. Like cockroaches, Winters said with dark humor, gradually shifting his position to create separation between himself and Elena, a basic tactical move to prevent a single line of fire from neutralizing both of them. Keller smiled thinly. An apt comparison, perhaps. Survivors against all odds. But this ends tonight. He gestured to his security team. Secure them, alive if possible. There are questions that need answering about who else knows of our operation. Once as the guards advanced, Elena assessed her options. Direct confrontation would likely fail. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The explosives were placed, but not yet armed for remote detonation. Their exit route was blocked by Keller and his men. Then, unexpectedly, the facility's lights flickered and went out, plunging the production floor into darkness for several critical seconds before emergency lighting engaged. In that moment of confusion, a new voice spoke from somewhere in the shadows. Echo Team never leaves anyone behind. A precise series of shots rang out through the darkness, and two of Keller's guards dropped, clutching non-lethal wounds to their legs. The remaining guards turned toward the new threat, giving Elena and Winters the opening they needed. Moving with the coordinated precision of experienced operators, they neutralized the remaining guards before they could recover from the surprise. Keller reached for a weapon concealed beneath his jacket, but Elena was faster, closing the distance between them and disarming him with a swift, practiced movement. "Don't move," she commanded, securing his hands behind his back with tactical restraints. From the shadows emerged a figure Elena had thought long dead, Lieutenant Sarah Mackenzie, former intelligence officer of Echo Team. Her appearance had changed, hair shorter, a prominent scar across her left cheek, but her eyes held the same sharp intelligence Elena remembered. "Lieutenant," Elena breathed, momentary shock giving way to fierce joy. "You're alive." "Barely," Mackenzie replied with a grim smile. "And it's been a long 3 years of deep cover." She nodded toward Keller. "I've been tracking this bastard since the Hindu Kush, gathering evidence, identifying his network." "You've been inside Aegis all this time?" Winters asked incredulously. "Nightingale," Elena realized, remembering Amira's source. "You were the leak." Mackenzie nodded. "Working my way up through their security division, accessing files, documenting everything. I almost had enough to go public when I realized you were still alive, Elena. Then everything accelerated." "How touching," Keller interrupted sarcastically. "The great Echo Team reunion. But you're forgetting something important. Aegis isn't just a company, it's a network that extends into every branch of government, every intelligence agency. Whatever evidence you think you have will never see the light of day." "That's where you're wrong, Svimam," Elena informed him. "We've already secured the project safeguard data, all of it, and it's being prepared for distribution to multiple channels simultaneously. Law enforcement, congressional oversight, international courts, and the press." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Keller's composed features. "You're bluffing. That data is secured behind multiple layers of encryption." "Not anymore," Winters confirmed, patting the data drive in his pocket. "Every detail of your operation, from illegal arms deals to chemical weapons development. It's all here." Elena keyed her comm. "Harrison, status update." "We're monitoring your position," came the immediate response. "Security forces are regrouping for a full sweep of the facility. You need to move now." "Copy that," Elena acknowledged. To Mackenzie, she added, "We have an extraction plan, but we need to leave immediately." "What about him?" Winters nodded toward Keller. Elena considered their options. Taking Keller with them would complicate their escape and potentially endanger the team. Leaving him free to coordinate pursuit was equally problematic. "We take him," she decided. "He's our insurance policy until we're clear of the facility." Mackenzie nodded in agreement. "There's a service elevator at the back of the production floor. It leads to a loading dock with vehicle access. Less security than the main exits." "Lead the way," Elena directed, keeping a firm grip on Keller as they moved. As they crossed the production floor, Elena activated the remote arming sequence for the explosives they had placed. "Charges armed," she reported over the comm. "Detonation in 15 minutes. "Copy that," Harrison acknowledged. "Extraction team moving into position now." The service elevator was unguarded, likely overlooked in the chaos of the security response. They descended quickly to the loading dock level, where large bay doors opened to the exterior of the facility. "Security will have this area monitored," Mackenzie warned as they approached the exit. "Standard protocol is 2 guards at the vehicle checkpoint." "We'll use Keller," Elena decided. "His authority should get us through with minimal resistance." She positioned Keller in front of their group, keeping a firm hand on his arm and her weapon concealed but ready. "You're going to order those guards to let us pass," she instructed him. "One wrong word, one signal for help, and this ends badly for you." Keller's expression remained defiant, but he nodded his understanding of the situation. As they approached the checkpoint, the guards immediately stood at attention, recognizing their CEO despite the unusual circumstances. "Sir," one of them began, clearly confused by Keller's disheveled appearance in the presence of strangers. Is everything all right? Fine, Johnson, Keller replied smoothly. Security breach on the east side has been contained. I'm escorting these consultants off-site as a precaution. The guard hesitated, protocol warring with his reluctance to question his superior. Sir, I should call this into security control. Standard procedure during facility lockdown. Elena tensed, ready to act if the situation deteriorated. But Keller, perhaps calculating his own odds of survival, continued his deception. That won't be necessary, he said authoritatively. I've already cleared it with Director Simmons. Now open the gate, please. We don't have time for delays. The combination of Keller's commanding presence and the guard's conditioning to obey finally won out. They opened the vehicle gate, allowing the group to pass through onto a service road that curved around the perimeter of the facility. Extraction team, we're exiting the facility via the south loading dock, Elena reported over the comm. 4 personnel, 1 detainee, request immediate pickup. Copy that, came Murphy's response. Approaching your position now. ETA 2 minutes. As they moved away from the checkpoint, Keller finally broke his compliant facade. You realize this changes nothing, he said coldly. Aegis operations extend far beyond this facility. Project Safeguard is just one of many initiatives. You can't stop what's already in motion. Maybe not, Elena acknowledged, but we can expose it. We can bring it into the light. And systems like yours don't survive scrutiny. Naive, Keller scoffed. The public has a short memory. The officials you think will hold us accountable are often the same ones who authorized our operations in the first place. This is a temporary setback, nothing more. Before Elena could respond, the distinctive rumble of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. Murphy's pickup truck emerged from the darkness, pulling to a stop beside them. Your ride, Gunny, Murphy announced, leaning out the window with a grim smile. They loaded quickly, securing Keller in the center of the rear seat where he could be monitored from all sides. As they pulled away from the facility, Elena checked her watch. 3 minutes to detonation, she noted. We need to clear the blast radius. Murphy accelerated down the mountain road, navigating the sharp turns with practiced skill. Behind them, the Aegis facility remained illuminated against the night sky. Security lights sweeping the perimeter as teams continued their search for the intruders already escaping. Everyone accounted for? Elena asked, mentally checking off team members. Tom and Viper are already at the rendezvous point, Harrison reported from the front passenger seat. Maria and Jake are standing by with medical support if needed. Elena nodded, relief washing through her as she realized they had succeeded against overwhelming odds. They had the evidence. They had damaged Aegis's production capability, and most importantly, everyone on her team had survived. As they reached a vantage point overlooking the facility, Murphy slowed the vehicle. 1 minute to detonation, he announced. Want to watch your handiwork, Gunny? Elena hesitated, then nodded. Some part of her needed to see this through to completion, to witness the destruction of the facility that represented so much pain and betrayal. They exited the vehicle, keeping Keller secured, and watched from the ridge as the countdown continued. When it reached 0, a series of precisely calculated explosions bloomed within the production section of the Aegis facility. Not the massive Hollywood-style fireball that might have resulted from less controlled demolition, but a surgical strike that targeted specific systems while minimizing collateral damage. Production capability neutralized, Winters confirmed, watching through binoculars. Primary mixing station destroyed, chemical storage compromised. Control systems offline. They won't be manufacturing Project Safeguard anytime soon. And the evidence? Elena asked, turning to Mackenzie. Combined with what I've gathered over 3 years, it's more than enough, the lieutenant assured her. Names, dates, financial transactions, test results, deployment plans, everything needed to expose not just Project Safeguard, but the entire Aegis operation. As they returned to the vehicle and continued toward the rendezvous point, Elena felt a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction at completing the mission, relief at her team's safety, vindication for Echo Team's sacrifice, and a strange sense of closure that had eluded her for 3 years. But there was something else too, a quiet certainty that their work wasn't finished. Exposing Aegis was just the beginning. The system that had allowed such an operation to flourish, that had betrayed its own operators and abandoned its principles in the name of expediency, still needed to be held accountable. That would be a different kind of mission, fought not with explosives and tactical insertions, but with evidence and testimony, with the slow, patient work of rebuilding what had been corrupted. 3 weeks after the raid on the Aegis facility was burning, while she's the facility, Elena stood at the window of a safe house in Northern Virginia, watching rain pattern against the glass. Behind her, the team that had come to feel like family was gathered around a television, watching as the scandal they had exposed continued to unfold across national news networks. Aegis Defense CEO Richard Keller appeared before the Senate Intelligence Committee today, the news anchor reported, facing questions about the company's alleged development of chemical weapons for domestic deployment. This marks the fifth day of hearings into what some are calling the most significant breach of public trust since Watergate. The screen showed Keller, diminished now, his confident demeanor replaced by the defensive posture of a man fighting for his freedom, being sworn in before the committee. "How far we've come," Murphy observed from his position at the dining table, where multiple laptops displayed different news feeds and intelligence updates. 3 weeks ago, Keller was untouchable. Now he's fighting to stay out of prison. "It's not just Keller," Harrison added. "The investigation has already identified 27 government officials implicated in Aegis operations, military officers, intelligence directors, even 2 sitting congressmen." Elena turned from the window, surveying the room that had become their command center since returning from California. The walls were covered with photographs, documents, and news clippings, a visual representation of the case they had built against Aegis and its network of enablers. "What's the latest on Project Safeguard?" she asked, directing her question to Mackenzie, who had become their primary liaison with the federal task force investigating Aegis. "Production capability was completely destroyed in our operation," Mackenzie confirmed, "and the FBI has secured all research data from Aegis satellite facilities. The chemical compound itself has been classified as a prohibited weapon under international conventions." "And the veterans?" Jake asked, his voice tight with emotion. "The ones who died because they knew too much?" "The Justice Department has opened investigations into 34 suspicious deaths previously ruled as suicides or accidents," Tom replied, consulting a report on his laptop. "Your father's case is among them, Jake. The evidence we provided about Aegis's targeted elimination program was compelling." Jake nodded, blinking back tears. He deserved better. They all did. "They'll get justice now," Elena assured him, crossing the room to place a hand on his shoulder. "That's what this was all about." The news broadcast continued, showing footage of protesters gathered outside Aegis headquarters in Virginia, demanding accountability and transparency. Public outrage had grown exponentially as details of the company's operations emerged, not just Project Safeguard, but years of illegal arms dealing, political manipulation, and the systematic elimination of potential whistleblowers. "Our source within the FBI tells me they have seized documents dating back to 2003, Murphy reported. "Aegis wasn't just a rogue contractor. It was the private enforcement arm for a shadow network within the government itself." "The question is how high it goes," Winter said, looking up from the files he was reviewing. "How many more dominoes will fall before this is over?" "As many as necessary," Elena stated firmly, "no matter who they are." Her phone buzzed with a text message from an encrypted number they had established for communication with Amira, who had become the public face of the Aegis expose in the press. The young journalist had leveraged her connections to ensure the evidence reached multiple media outlets simultaneously, preventing any single entity from suppressing the story. "Amira says the Washington Post is running a major piece tomorrow," Elena announced, reading the message. "New details about Aegis operations in South America and Eastern Europe. The international dimensions are expanding." "Good," Maria said from her position by the kitchen counter, where she was preparing coffee for the team. "The more comprehensive the exposure, the harder it will be for anyone to sweep this under the rug." Viper, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the debriefing, finally spoke. "What happens to us when this is all over?" he asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. "We broke dozens of laws taking down Aegis. Trespassing, breaking and entering, theft of classified information, destruction of private property. The list goes on." It was a concern that had weighed on all of them, though few had voiced it as directly as Viper. Their actions, while morally justified, had operated well outside legal boundaries. The Justice Department has offered us a deal, Alina revealed, having kept this information private until she was certain of its terms. Full immunity in exchange for our continued cooperation with the investigation. They need our testimony to make the case against Aegis and its government collaborators. And they're willing to overlook our methods? Tom asked skeptically, the law enforcement officer in him struggling with the compromise. Not overlook, Elena clarified. Acknowledge as necessary under extraordinary circumstances. The evidence we secured has prevented what could have been a catastrophic abuse of power. They're calling us whistleblowers, not criminals. Whistleblowers, Winters repeated with a hint of irony. 3 years in hiding and armed infiltration and explosives. Not your typical whistleblower profile. These aren't typical circumstances, Harrison pointed out. Sometimes extraordinary threats require extraordinary responses. The discussion was interrupted by breaking news on the television. The anchor's expression had turned grave as she delivered an update. We're just receiving reports that former CIA Deputy Director Andrew Mitchell has been found dead at his home in McLean, Virginia. Authorities are describing the death as an apparent suicide, though investigation is ongoing. Mitchell had been scheduled to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow regarding his knowledge of Aegis defense operations during his tenure at the agency. A heavy silence fell over the safe house as the implications sank in. It's not over, Mackenzie said quietly. Aegis might be exposed, but the network behind it is still fighting back. Which means we need to accelerate our timeline, Murphy decided, already typing rapidly on his laptop. Mitchell's suicide is too convenient, too predictable. We need to get the rest of our evidence into the right hands before anyone else conveniently dies before testifying. Elena nodded in agreement, her tactical mind already shifting to address this new threat. We'll need to contact every official on our disclosure list, provide them with copies of the evidence immediately. No waiting, no scheduled releases. Full disclosure across all channels. I'll coordinate with Amira, Jake volunteered. Make sure the press has everything they need to run comprehensive stories tomorrow, not piecemeal over weeks. And we should consider moving to a different location, Harrison suggested. This safe house has served us well, but if the opposition is eliminating witnesses, we should assume our security may be compromised. As the team sprang into action, Elena stepped back for a moment, watching them work with the coordinated efficiency that had made their operation against Aegis successful. Each person knew their role, understood the stakes, and operated with a sense of purpose that transcended personal concerns. This was what she had missed during her years at Murphy's Roadhouse. Not just the adrenaline of operations or the satisfaction of completing missions, but the profound connection that came from serving alongside others committed to the same cause. The camaraderie of warriors facing shared dangers. The trust that developed when lives depended on each other. Her thoughts were interrupted by Winters, who approached with a solemnity that suggested important news. I just received word from one of my contacts in the Pentagon, he said quietly, ensuring only Elena could hear. They've located the remains of the rest of Echo Team. Recovery operation is underway in the Hindu Kush. Elena felt a surge of emotion, grief mingled with a profound sense of relief. After 3 years, her fallen comrades would finally return home, would receive the recognition and honors they deserved. When, she asked simply. Extraction team is on site now. They should be back on U.S. soil within 48 hours. Winters hesitated, then added, they're asking if we want to be present for the repatriation ceremony at Dover. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. This too was part of closure, honoring those who had fallen, ensuring they were not forgotten or abandoned, even in death. We'll be there, she managed finally, all of us. She glanced around at the team that had come together to complete Echo Team's mission. They should know who carried on their fight. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity as they worked to ensure the full extent of the Aegis conspiracy would be exposed, regardless of any attempts to silence witnesses or suppress evidence. By evening, they had distributed their documentation to over 50 separate entities, law enforcement agencies, congressional offices, international courts, and media outlets around the world. It's done, Murphy announced finally, closing his laptop with a sense of finality. No matter what happens now, the truth is out there. Too widespread to contain, too well documented to dismiss. So what now? Maria asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. We've completed the mission. We've secured immunity. Where do we go from here? Elena looked around at the faces watching her expectantly. They had come together as strangers, united by a common purpose. Now that purpose was fulfilled, but the bonds formed during their shared struggle remained. Now we have choices, she said carefully. Real choices, for the first time in years. The immunity deal includes new identities if we want them, relocation, a fresh start, or we can return to our previous lives now that the threat from Aegis has been neutralized. What about Murphy's Roadhouse? Jake asked. Will you go back? Elena smiled, thinking of the roadside bar that had been her sanctuary for 6 months. I don't know. It served its purpose when I needed somewhere to hide, somewhere to heal, but I'm not hiding anymore. You could reopen it, Tom suggested, not as a cover, but as a real business, a place for veterans to gather to find the same peace you sought there. The idea held unexpected appeal, not a retreat from the world, as it had been before, but an engagement with it on new terms. Maybe, she acknowledged, but first, we have unfinished business. Echo Team deserves to come home with honor, and we need to ensure that the full story of Aegis and its collaborators is told, that accountability reaches everyone involved, no matter how powerful. So the mission continues, Harrison observed, just in a different form. The mission always continues, Elena replied. That's what service means. The battlefields change, the objectives evolve, but the commitment remains. As night fell, the safe house grew quiet. Team members drifted to their assigned rooms for rest, though Elena suspected few would sleep soundly. The news of Mitchell's death and the impending repatriation of Echo Team's remains had affected them all, reminding them that their victory, while significant, was part of a larger struggle that continued beyond their immediate actions. Elena found herself on the small balcony outside her room, watching stars emerge in the clearing sky. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean and fragrant with renewal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, but tonight she allowed herself a moment of reflection, of gratitude for having found her way back to herself, back to service, back to the values that had defined her life as a Marine. A soft knock at her door announced Mackenzie's presence. The lieutenant joined her on the balcony, offering a steaming mug of coffee. Couldn't sleep either? Elena asked, accepting the coffee with appreciation. Too much adrenaline still, Mackenzie admitted, and too many thoughts about what comes next. They stood in companionable silence for a time, two survivors of a mission gone tragically wrong, now vindicated by the truth finally emerging. I never gave up, Mackenzie said eventually. Even when I thought I was the only one left, I kept fighting, kept gathering evidence, infiltrating deeper into Aegis, looking for a way to expose them. You did what Marines do, Elena acknowledged. Adapt, overcome, complete the mission. What about you? Mackenzie asked. All those months at Murphy's, serving drinks, wiping tables, was it hard stepping away from who you were? Elena considered the question thoughtfully. At first, it felt like surrender, like I was betraying the team by hiding instead of fighting. But over time, I realized I was healing, finding my way back to myself through simple service, through daily acts of care instead of combat. And now? Now I understand that both are necessary. The warrior and the server, the fighter and the healer. Different expressions of the same core values. Elena turned to face her former teammate. What about you? After all this is over, what will you do? Mackenzie looked out over the darkened landscape, her expression thoughtful. I don't know yet. I've spent 3 years deep undercover, living a lie, waiting for the moment to strike. It's hard to imagine normal life after that. Normal is overrated, Elena said with a small smile. But purpose never is. You'll find your next mission, whatever form it takes. As they stood together beneath the star-filled sky, Elena felt a sense of completion that had eluded her since the ambush in the Hindu Kush. Echo Team's final mission was being fulfilled. The truth was emerging. Justice, long delayed, was finally being served. And she, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, had found her way home. Not to a place, but to herself, to her values, to the service that had always defined her. 1 year to the day after the raid on the Aegis facility, Elena stood at the gravesite in Arlington National Cemetery, watching as the honor guard performed the ceremonial flag folding with precision and reverence. Around her gathered a small group of mourners, the team from Murphy's, senior military officers, family members of the fallen, and a few carefully vetted journalists documenting the historic occasion. The remains of Echo Team, Williams, Chen, Rodriguez, Wright, and Blackburn, had finally received the full military honors they deserved, their sacrifice officially recognized after years of being officially listed as killed in training accidents to maintain the secrecy of their mission. As the last notes of taps faded across the hallowed grounds, Elena stepped forward to receive the folded flag on behalf of Echo Team. The young Marine presenting it met her eyes with solemn respect, recognizing a fellow warrior who had carried the memory of these fallen operators through years of denial and cover-up. On behalf of the President of the United States Marine Corps, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service, he recited formally. Elena accepted the flag, holding it carefully against her chest, feeling the weight of symbolism it carried. Not just for Echo Team, but for all those who had been silenced in the name of expediency, whose sacrifices had been denied or diminished to protect systems that had failed them. The official ceremony concluded, but Elena remained at the graveside as others gradually departed. She was joined by Winters and Mackenzie, the three survivors of Echo Team, now united in honoring those who hadn't returned. "It's finally done," Mackenzie said quietly, placing a small stone on each headstone in the Jewish tradition of remembrance. "They're home with honor." "Took long enough," Winters observed, his tone carrying the edge of bitterness that hadn't fully faded despite the vindication of the past year. 4 years, 2 congressional investigations, and a major public scandal before they got the recognition they deserved. "But they got it," Elena pointed out. "The truth came out. Their families know what really happened. That's more than many get." They stood in silence for a moment, each lost in personal reflection on the journey that had brought them to this point. The Aegis investigation had expanded far beyond the initial revelations, uncovering a network of corruption that spanned multiple agencies, contractors, and administrations. The resulting reforms had begun to address systemic failures in oversight and accountability, though Elena harbored no illusions about the permanence of such changes. "Any regrets?" Mackenzie asked, directing the question to both of her former teammates. Winters considered this. "About exposing Aegis? Not for a second. About how long it took us to find each other, to complete the mission? Maybe. We found each other when it mattered," Elena said, "when we were ready, when the truth could finally be heard." They were interrupted by the approach of a distinguished older man in a perfectly tailored suit, Senator Robert Kavanaugh, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee that had led the investigation into Aegis. He had been instrumental in cutting through the bureaucratic resistance to the official recognition of Echo Team's service. "Sergeant Rodriguez," he greeted Elena formally. "Captain Winters, Lieutenant Mackenzie, I wanted to pay my respects personally." "Thank you for your support, Senator," Elena replied. "Without your committee's persistence, this day might never have come." "It was the least we could do," Kavanaugh acknowledged. "Your teammates deserve the truth, as did the American people." He hesitated, then added, "There's something else. The President has authorized me to inform you that all 3 of you will be receiving the Intelligence Star for exceptional service in a zone of significant risk. The ceremony will be private, given the classified nature of some of your operations, but the recognition is official and permanent. The Intelligence Star, one of the highest awards given for covert operations, rarely acknowledged publicly." Elena exchanged glances with Winters and Mackenzie, seeing her own mixed emotions reflected in their expressions. After years of operating in shadows, of having their service denied or diminished, the official recognition carried significant weight. "Thank you, Senator," Winters responded for all of them. "Though we didn't do it for medals." "The best ones never do," Kavanaugh observed. With a respectful nod, he withdrew, leaving the 3 survivors alone with their fallen comrades once more. 6 months later, Elena stood in the parking lot of Murphy's Roadhouse, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. The roadside bar looked much the same as when she had left it. Weathered timber exterior, neon beer signs glowing in the windows, pickup trucks and motorcycles parked in neat rows. But there were differences too. A new sign hung beside the entrance, smaller than the main Murphy's logo, but significant in its symbolism. A simple rendering of the eagle, globe, and anchor of the Marine Corps, with the words, "All who served welcome," beneath it. The door opened, and Frank Murphy himself emerged, wiping his hands on a bar towel. "She's all ready for the grand reopening," he announced with satisfaction. "Want to come see?" Elena nodded, following him inside. The interior had been renovated during her absence, the bar polished to a warm glow, the tables refinished, the lighting improved. But the most striking change was the back wall, which had been transformed into a memorial. Photographs of service members from various eras lined the wall, from World War II to the present day. Among them were the faces of Echo Team, Williams, Chen, Rodriguez, Wright, Blackburn, their official military portraits displayed with honor. Beneath each photograph was a small plaque with their name, rank, and a simple inscription: honor, courage, commitment. "Jake's idea," Murphy explained, noting Elena's emotional reaction to the display. "Said every veteran who comes here should know they're among family, that their service is remembered." "It's perfect," Elena said softly, reaching out to touch the frame holding Lance Corporal Williams's photograph. The repatriation ceremony at Dover Air Force Base had provided a measure of closure, but seeing her teammates honored here, in the place that had become her sanctuary, felt like the completion of a circle. "How's the team settling in?" Murphy asked as they continued their tour of the renovated establishment. "Finding their way," Elena replied. "Harrison's consulting with the Pentagon on security reforms. Tom's back at the sheriff's department, though he visits regularly. Maria's working at the VA hospital in San Diego. Viper's running a veteran support group out of the community center. Turns out he's good at helping others find their way back from the edge." "And Winters and McKenzie?" "Still testifying in Washington." The Aegis investigation has expanded into something much larger. They're key witnesses, helping identify the entire network. Elena smiled slightly. "They make quite a team." "Speaking of teams," Murphy said, leading her toward the kitchen, "you've got some visitors." As they pushed through the swinging doors, Elena found Jake supervising the final preparations for the evening's reopening. He had stepped up during her absence, managing the day-to-day operations of Murphy's while she dealt with the aftermath of the Aegis operation. "Boss," he called out with a grin, "come check out the new setup. We've got everything running twice as efficiently now." Elena followed him through the kitchen, impressed by the improvements. What had once been a basic operation suited to a roadside bar had been upgraded to accommodate increased capacity and more diverse offerings. "We added a full dinner menu," Jake explained proudly. "Figured with the expanded clientele, we should offer more than just bar food. Maria helped design it. Turns out she was a chef before joining the Navy." "And who's running this expanded kitchen?" Elena asked, noting the professional-grade equipment that had replaced the simple grill and fryer. "That would be me," came a familiar voice from the walk-in cooler. Viper emerged, wearing a chef's apron over jeans and a t-shirt, his massive frame somehow fitting naturally in the kitchen environment. "Turns out I'm good at more than intimidating people and riding motorcycles." Elena raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You cook?" "Army taught me logistics and resource management. Running a kitchen isn't that different from running an operation. Timing, coordination, execution." He shrugged, a hint of self-consciousness beneath his matter-of-fact tone. "Plus, my grandmother was Italian. You don't grow up in that house without learning your way around a kitchen." "He's being modest," Jake interjected. "Wait till you try his lasagna. It's bringing in people from 3 counties. The back door opened, and Tom entered, still in his sheriff's uniform. "Thought I'd stop by before the crowds arrive," he explained, nodding to Elena. "Good to have you back, Gunny." "Good to be back," she replied sincerely. "Though I see you've all been managing just fine without me." "Managing, sure," Tom acknowledged, "but it wasn't the same. Murphy's needs its heart." The simple statement affected Elena more than she expected. For so long, she had seen herself primarily as a warrior, defined by combat skills, tactical thinking, the ability to complete missions under extreme pressure. The idea that she could be the heart of anything was still new, still challenging to her self-perception. As they moved back into the main bar area, Elena noted other changes that reflected the establishment's evolution. A small library of military history books occupied one corner. A bulletin board displayed information about veteran services and support groups. A framed copy of the Constitution hung prominently near the entrance, a reminder of the principles they had all sworn to defend. "We open in an hour," Murphy announced, checking his watch. "Better finish your preparations." As the team dispersed to their various stations, Elena took a moment alone at the bar, running her hand along the polished surface. 6 months ago, she had stood behind this bar as a woman in hiding, serving drinks and wiping tables while concealing her true identity. Now she returned as herself. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, Force Recon Marine, survivor of Echo Team, exposer of the Aegis conspiracy. The journey had been unexpected, painful at times, but ultimately redemptive. From the ambush in the Hindu Kush to the confrontation with the Desert Vipers, from the raid on the Aegis facility to the congressional hearings that followed, each step had brought her closer to reconciling the warrior she had been with the person she was becoming. The door opened, admitting a group of early arrivals, veterans from the look of them bearing the subtle markers of military service that Elena had learned to recognize during her time at Murphy's. They nodded respectfully as they entered, some recognizing her from news coverage of the Aegis hearings. "Gunny Rodriguez," one of them acknowledged, offering a crisp salute. "Honor to meet you, ma'am." Elena returned the salute, then extended her hand. "Just Elena here," she said warmly. "Welcome to Murphy's." As the evening progressed, the bar gradually filled with a diverse cross-section of the community. Veterans and civilians, young and old, regulars and newcomers, drawn by curiosity about the reopening. Elena moved among them with ease, no longer hiding who she was, but not drawing attention to it either. Near midnight, as the crowd began to thin, a young woman approached her hesitantly. She couldn't have been more than 22, with the lean build of a runner and the 1,000-yard stare Elena recognized all too well. "Ma'am, I'm Lance Corporal Sarah Webb, just back from Afghanistan. I heard what happened, what you said about not being able to go back to normal." Her voice dropped. "How do you do it? How do you come back from that and just function?" Elena sat down her tray and gave the young Marine her full attention. "You don't come back, Lance Corporal, not really. The person who left doesn't exist anymore. You build a new person with the pieces that survived, and you find a new mission." "What's yours?" Elena gestured around the bar. "This, serving people, creating a place where veterans can come and not have to explain themselves, where civilians can learn that we're not broken, just different, where someone like you can ask someone like me how to survive and get an honest answer, which is one day at a time, one table at a time, one act of service at a time." As closing time approached, Elena found herself behind the bar, falling naturally into the rhythms that had become familiar during her months as a server. There was comfort in the simple tasks, pouring drinks, wiping surfaces, ensuring everyone's needs were met. "Some things don't change," observed Murphy, joining her behind the bar. "Still more comfortable serving than being served." Elena smiled in acknowledgement. "Old habits." "Good ones," Murphy countered. "Service takes many forms. Sometimes it's charging into combat. Sometimes it's making sure a veteran has a safe place to remember without being overwhelmed." Different expressions of the same core values. As the last patron left and the team began closing procedures, Elena stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was clear, stars brilliant above, the distant sound of waves breaking against the shore a rhythmic backdrop to her thoughts. She thought of Echo Team, not just the fallen members now honored on the memorial wall, but the survivors too. Winters and Mackenzie continuing the fight in Washington, testifying before committees, ensuring the truth was fully revealed. And the new team that had formed around her at Murphy's, Jake finding purpose in honoring his father's memory, Viper discovering redemption through service of a different kind, Tom bringing law enforcement integrity to their shared mission, Maria healing bodies as well as spirits, Harrison and Murphy lending their experience and wisdom to guide the next generation. They had created something that would continue beyond the immediate victory, a place where the values of service, sacrifice, and honor would be preserved and transmitted to future generations. A place where veterans could find understanding, civilians could gain perspective, and the critical bonds between military and society could be strengthened. For Elena Rodriguez, the journey had come full circle. She had returned to Murphy's not as someone in hiding, but as herself, complex, battle-scarred, but whole in a way she hadn't been before. The warrior and the server, the fighter and the healer. Different expressions of the same core values, now integrated into a more complete identity than she had ever thought possible. As she looked up at the vast canopy of stars, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten during her years of hiding and guilt. Hope, not just for herself, but for the principles she had always served, for the country she had sworn to defend, for the possibility of accountability and renewal even in systems corrupted by power and greed. The mission continued. Different battlefield, different objectives, but the same unwavering commitment to service that had defined her life as a Marine. Always faithful, always forward. And this time, she didn't face it alone. In the quiet moments after closing time, when Murphy's Roadhouse stands empty, save for memories, Elena Rodriguez sometimes pauses by the memorial wall. Her fingers trace the names of those who never came home. Williams, Chen, Rodriguez, Wright, Blackburn, brothers and sisters who paid the ultimate price for truths too dangerous to be known. The journey from elite warrior to anonymous server and back again wasn't one she chose, but perhaps it was one she needed. In fighting for justice, she rediscovered purpose. In exposing corruption, she honored the fallen. In building this sanctuary for broken souls, she found healing for her own. War changes everyone who touches it. Some, like Keller, let it corrupt their souls. Others, like Elena, carry its weight with quiet dignity. The real battles aren't fought with weapons, but with choices. To face the darkness or turn away. To seek vengeance or justice. To remember or forget. Tonight, as veterans and civilians share stories across polished tables, a different kind of service continues. Different battlefield, different mission, same unwavering commitment. Perhaps the true measure of courage isn't found in the medals we earn, but in the lives we rebuild after the fighting stops. What battles are you still carrying long after you've left the field?